Call this meeting to order. This is a workshop meeting of the Board of Directors of the Vallecitos Water District for Monday, February 13th, 2017. Could I ask our General Manager to lead us in the pledge?
You sure can. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, can we have a roll call?
I'm here.
Here.
Present.
Here. Here. Okay, next is adoption of the agenda for the workshop. So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Carries unanimously. Public comment. I have one request to speak during this portion. Mike Hunsaker.
Mike Hunsaker, 115 Equestrian Court, San Marcos. The biggest buzz, of course, is Oroville Dam. But I don't think many people realize just how much of a bad effect it would have in Southern California should that dam go. It is a linchpin in the water district, which supplies us with a good deal of our water. If there is a breakage, does this present a shortage problem for us? Although everyone has been talking about drought causing a shortage, the laws are written to address any shortage. So if Oroville Dam goes, how much of an impact does that have on our immediate water supply? When I say immediate, what do we get from the MWD? There is a secondary effect, and that is whether or not we can continue to get a Liebenheim water. If they suffer a shortage, could this snowball? The manner in which the state has handled this situation is less than glorious. And I would hope that we could have a complete report and some discussion of just how bad things have gotten. This is a dam that's a half a century old and is beginning to form cracks, and that gives me some cause to concern. And the erosion is not really predictable. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 1, Master Plan CIP and Water Resources.
Yep, so I'll just have Rob come up and kick us off here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prum. Good afternoon, President Ellifart, members of the board. We have a couple presentations for you tonight there from our master plan consultant, Black and Beach. I wanted to just stand up here and introduce Black and Beach, tell you a little bit about them and the presenters that we have before you today. Black and Beach is a nationwide firm. They perform hundreds of master planning documents every year. Locally, they performed a significant amount of master planning documents in the area. These include the Escondido Recycled Water Master Plan, City of San Diego's Recycled Water Master Plan, as well as Encino Wastewater Authority's Master Plan. One more note, too, about our master planning document. This will also be third-party reviewed. This will be done by Ken Weinberg. He was the former director of the Department of Water Resources at the San Diego County Water Authority. So he's very knowledgeable about the regional water issues. So the first speaker we'll have for you here is Mr. James Strayer. Mr. Strayer has 20 years of experience on master planning. He's worked on the 2008 master plan for the Vallecitos Water District. He's also worked on the San Diego County Water Authority's master plan, as well as the Encino Wastewater Authority's master plan. And then the second speaker we'll have for you is Mr. Kevin Davis, who also has about 20 years of experience on water and wastewater projects. And he is currently overseeing work done on the San Diego County Water Authority's master plan. And with that there, I'll go ahead and turn over to Mr. Strayer so we can start the 2014 master plan capital improvement program.
Quick question, Rob. Master plan status is a snapshot in time.
What data are we using for our snapshot in time on the 2014 master plan?
We're using demand data from 2008 all the way through June 30th of 2014.
Okay, and we are behind on this process, I'm assuming, because it's 2017, but how far are we behind? A year and a half?
We're probably behind about a year or so there, according to the schedule that we originally had, yes.
So does that mean that our next 5-year plan can be 6 years out?
We haven't decided exactly when the next master plan will occur. We could do it in 5 years, or we could do it longer than that if needs be.
Thank you.
With that, I'll have Mr. Strayer come up and start the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Board. It's good to be in front of you all again, presenting some progress. We're fairly well along our way here, and I think we have some good news. I'll let you be the judge of that, but you directed us to take a look at something, and I think we have some good news for you today. So without further ado, we'll get into that. And then again, this part is about the master plan. Kevin's going to talk more about the reuse parts of the study. That's the second part of the workshop, different piece. So the master plan process, this is just kind of a roadmap of that process. We start with things like approved land use that comes from the land use agencies, the city, the county. We create water and sewer models. These are tools we use to assess the sufficiency of your system and whether they need capital improvement projects. We assign duty factors. What that really means is how much water and wastewater does each of those uses actually take. And we use historical data on that to make sure that it's linked up to what's actually being used, not just speculation. We generate future water and sewer demand projections from that. We put that into the models. Then we run the models, and then the linkage there is we also have established design criteria. You call that industry best practices. We commonly look at what other agencies are doing, along with what is the standard care practice that water agencies are planning for on both the water and wastewater side. And then that establishes a capital improvement program and a phasing to do that in. So we were fairly far along in that process, following the same process we used in the 2008 study. And then when the CIPs were presented, and this is what we're going to come back to, say, okay, how conservative are we? And with what we're seeing with water and wastewater flows and demands, is that really, do we need to revisit that, and are we being too conservative? So this kind of outlines, yes?
Question.
Go ahead.
We just heard that the snapshot is from 08 to 14. From 14 to present, or even last year, we've had 2 major developments show up, and the city itself has redone their general plan extensively. My concern, and maybe that you're going to talk about that when you do that adjustment that you just mentioned, my concern is we're going to be the same place we were months ago when everybody was clamoring about, my goodness gracious, you got no water, you're based on your documents. Are we going to be able to bridge that so that we can point definitively at our master plan and identify these recent developments of significance?
Yeah, and I think the answer is yes, because the way that the master plan works is we have to tie ourselves to what's approved, like in the land use per se. It's always going to be changing. We know that. You've seen that. You always see those processes come through in specific plans and general plan updates. But we have to anchor to what's approved at a point in time and then do the work built based on that. Now,
And
yes.
why?
Well, because we don't want to put the district in a position where you're speculating on what could be the land use or what should be approved or could be approved. So,
And in this case, where my large concern is, in this case, in 214, we had a land use that you're working on, but we absolutely have a new land use. And I think there is a pretty good differential. I see James behind you waving his hand to tell me where I don't know what I'm talking about.
Director Hatt, so the good news is for this 2014 master plan, the city of San Marcos actually adopted its new general, not SBA, but its general land use conditions, which includes all the development, including the creek, the University District, the Rancho Coronado. It's all in. That's all included in this master plan because it's already adopted. Certain spas, the specific areas, were adjusted slightly, but the general was completed prior to that, and also the county completed its land use document. So we have the most up-to-date land use document currently, the city and the county have not adopted new general land use documents since we started this process.
Okay, I stand corrected. I thought that was after the 14th. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good
And
news.
maybe one subtlety too is when we talk about the data that we use through 14, that's not necessarily the land use data, but the actual water unit demand data from the district's records. Okay?
Right.
And so there's some subtlety in the different data sets that we're using, but, so, yeah.
But the question specifically is then, New and Sierra has not been included in this because they have not been approved. Is that correct? So unless it was approved. they're
Right,
not-
and I did understand that, but, but the Highlands project was approved. And I think that should be in here, because it's an old project that's
I don't
been,
know if it was approved.
well, it was approved before, and it,
It was never approved.
I thought
It was just approved recently.
I thought
Just in the last 6 months it was
the,
approved.
and that's the only time it's been approved? I thought it was approved
Been before the
before.
council a few times, but it was never approved.
Oh,
And just one thing to clarify too with the San Marcos Highlands project, that was outside our water and sewer service areas here. So we treated that like brand-new development nonetheless here, because the master plan in 2008 did not account for it.
right, so it's in or out?
It was out,
Right.
yeah,
It is.
except for some minor acreage on the bottom, which Highlands is not developing anymore.
Right, okay.
It's in now.
But it's in now?
The board approved it, yes.
Okay, because the board approved it, it's in now? It's in the
Correct.
study?
Correct. Once,
Okay.
once the annexation conditions are executed and the board adopts a resolution, it's in.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
I'm sorry. It's in now, but it wasn't in as of June 30th, 2014.
Absolutely, Director Martin. So, but it wouldn't have been, even if the city had adopted it as a land use, it would not have been in our document because it's outside of our sphere of influence. So
Right.
it's outside of our water and sewer service area, so we don't study it. They came in afterwards.
Right.
So it's a moot point, whether it was adopted prior to this document or not. But what we do is a water sewer study for each project to make them whole in our master plan process. And also, when we bring it to the board for annexation, once they, as Rob stated, once they meet those conditions, then they're essentially in.
So this is included in the master plan.
The master plan would not include the Highlands, no, but it is
That's-
included in our final recommendations because the board took action on the annexations.
Okay.
But you won't find a Highlands project in the master plan.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll keep rolling. Good questions. So the initial capital improvement projects, that was what was done before. Based on the same thorough project that was used in 2002 and 2008. It produces conservative totals, and I'll explain why in the next graphic. And again, that's a little bit why master planning has traditionally been a little different path than, say, your urban water management plan, which is targeting what the actual water use is going to be. And then, of course, we noted, and I've already noticed this, that the board asked, or directed the staff to take a look and say, are we being too conservative from what we're assuming, what's driving the CIP and the underlying assumptions? So staff tasked us to go back and look at it. That's the presentation that we're giving here today, and worked very well with staff on going back and looking at that. So when we pulled in, okay, what are our additional data sources that we have available to us to look at? We looked at the new SANDAG projections. We looked at the San Diego County Water Authority projections for water supply and more recent data. These, again, as you noted, these master plans take about 2 years to do, and you start with the data set for a complete year. So sometimes you're already, to get a complete year of data, and you're also looking for multiple years. And the reason we look for multiple years is because, as you've seen, we have some dry years, we have some wet years. We have conservation, pretty extreme conservation we've seen in the last couple of years, but also what happens if we don't have that, do you have the same water use? That's why we like to kind of average out those little ups and downs that you have. But we also look for trends, and the trends have been, we're slowing down our consumptive use. You've seen it, I think that's why you directed us to take a look at it and ask if we were being too conservative. So, go ahead, Dr. Martin.
I have a question on County Water Authority projections. Do they actually look at those projections, or do they take SANDAG's numbers?
Yeah, they take SANDAG numbers, they take, and that's partly why you're going to see more consistency now in the next slide between your projections and the projections we have. We got updated population projections from SANDAG for 2015 and that shows more consistency between them. You're gonna see that parallel between the two.
Okay. Sandag just came up on the news as being problematic sometimes on their forecasting, which surprised me very much that they knew about it. And I just wondered if Santa Clara Water Authority does their own assessment, or they just take Sandag's numbers.
Yeah, and Sandag, the challenge with Sandag is, it's a good point, because Sandag is their inherent, a lot of their inherent work is about transportation and the growth of transportation systems and the growth of people. It's not always a one-to-one to a water system, because you've got employment, you've also got housing, so they're a little different. But that's the best tool that we have. Classically, over the 20 years in San Diego master planning water systems, we use Sandag series data. We're on series 13 right now. And I think the latest population, we showed a graph, we have it in your PowerPoint, at least the full 2015 data, which usually comes out April of the next year. So in April this year, we'll have 16 data to look at.
Thank you.
So this, a perfect time to this. This is the reforecasted population projections from Sandag. Again, we like what we saw here because it's more reasonable growth, what we're actually expecting to see. And where you really see this, the better slide is coming up when we actually show you the water demand projections and the wastewater. It's a lot kind of cleaner, but this is the underlying data that goes with it. So what we did do was we reformulated the projections, and again, only approved land uses were considered. We updated the water demands, linked those two together. We confirmed that the water authority results were consistent. That ties to Director Martin, your question right there. And we also updated the sewer flows and then took a look at the capital improvement program. And the result was, especially in the water system, and I'll explain this in the slides about it, we could defer a lot of capital from the water system side. Wastewater is a little different. Again, I'll go through each of those in the slides here. Okay, so this is the water system projections. And the top line, the lighter line, was the 2008 projection. The dashed top line was the previous projection that we're using in the master plan. And again, these are all, there's no right or wrong here. It's really based on approach. And the top lines, I think the best way to look at the top lines is really what could happen. That's all based on approved land use. It's all based on things that could happen. The bottom lines are more based on what's likely to happen. What do we expect based on what we're seeing, based on reduction in use, with all the conservation, all the attention that the community has on appropriate water use. There's a lot slower pace of growth. So that's, I think, probably the easiest way to look at it is what could happen versus what's likely to happen. So the two bottom lines, the line with the triangle, that's the water authority's line for supply. And again, that's driven by, you're going to be almost forced to conform with that because that's what they're guaranteeing you water for, unless new water sources come into play. So our line is very consistent now with that line, and it basically is looking at water demands. The growth still being there, but it's going to happen a lot slower. And because it happens a lot slower, we feel more comfortable that you can defer capital projects and not be at risk, especially on the water side. So the CIP for the water, and again, I haven't gotten to the wastewater yet, this is just the water. So that population growth allows us to shift demands. When we shift demands, a couple things happen. It means we can take projects and we can move them out into the future from our current phases. And then we can also reduce the size of some of the early phase projects. So you get kind of a two benefit. You get a capital deferment benefit, and then you also get a reduced scale. So you're not building as big a tanks or pipelines. Yes, yes, sir.
And I'm sorry to keep beating this drum, but it keeps being beat to us. On the two projects that are not in the 2014, Newland and Highlands, I think that the total residential population is, and somebody will correct me when I'm wrong, about 2,600 units, plus or minus? Yeah, 2,600 units. I know you've already said that you have all the rest of the updated plan for San Marcos. Do you have any idea of what that projection of units might be? I'm trying to get a percentage, so when they come here and tell us, oh my God, the world's falling because we're going to be adding hundreds of percentage, and it may be only 1 or 2% more. Do we have any of those numbers?
Director Hernandez, just to make sure I have your question straight here. You're looking for what the, I guess, demand projections would be existing land use versus a projected land use.
Yes, and then that total number versus what is coming ultimately with Newland, well, if it ever gets passed. Newland, it's certainly because Highlands has been past that. And I'm trying to put in my mind how big of a differential that percentage may be so that I'm not worried about a 20 or 40% increase, but it's only a 2 or 4% increase, which we can overcome quite easily. That's what I'm trying to put my mind around.
Sure, okay. So just to use some ballpark figures, for
Uh-huh.
instance, on the water demand side here, we're looking somewhere in the ballpark of about 2 million gallons per day, average demand, when you combine the Highlands and the Newland Sierra projects together. That was prior. When you add in what you think the demand's going to be with the actual development, it's actually going to be lower for the Newland Sierra. And of course, the Highlands, we didn't project in our master plan, so we're taking all of that into account. So we're in the ballpark of about 1.5 million, maybe 1.6 million gallons a day. So we're talking on the vicinity of about 40% less demand.
Right, and our master plan projections for our demand, how many million gallons a day is that?
So the master plan projects for the full, I think it was about 1.8 million gallons, that Newland Sierra.
No, not the Newland, our district. What is the demand for that?
Oh, I'm sorry, district-wide?
Yeah, is that what I'm looking at here?
Yes, yes, that's what you're looking at.
We're
here with
about
this orange line.
18.5 million? Am I reading that correctly? That's the orange line on the bottom.
Yes.
So we're 18.5 million. So plus or minus, it's gonna be less than a 10% increase for the Newland project. Am I getting that percentage?
Yeah, so if the
Pretty
Newland,
close?
so if the Newland project came online within this planning horizon, your numbers are right. It's probably about
Okay.
8%
Okay,
increase.
that puts me to rest. Thank you very much.
All right, so this slide is basically a summary of the capital improvements, and what we did was we barred the previous capital improvements for the water system, and then the blue is the revised. So again, what you're seeing some reduction in the size, and then a good bit of deferral that goes beyond the 2035 time period. So really, the master plans, we look at kind of a window of within what are we planning in these 5-year windows, and then everything else kind of gets pushed to, that's somewhere in the future. And again, a lot of these projects, and it's good to keep in context the master plan, just because they're in here doesn't mean that you go out and we start cranking and building things. Each one of these projects typically has, a use case or business case that goes on and says, okay, this was in the master plan, does it still make sense to do these things? Because they recognize there's changes that happen all the time. So the master plan sits up here with that. Yes, sir.
Okay, a question. On the projected water system CIPs, does that differentiate the CIPs that are ongoing and replacement versus the CIPs that are new facilities that will be needed in the future? Does it differentiate the two, or are they all in the same bucket?
Well, they're all maybe in a CIP bucket, but they are differentiated because they have different purposes and how they tie to your rate models and your rate cases.
But on this, what we're looking at,
Yeah, they're all aggregated.
they're all in the same bucket there, okay. So, because the CIP fees, obviously a lot of it's offset by development. The development comes in and pays future, not the current customer.
Correct. Anything that's capital expansion directly for development will be pulled into your rate case, your cost of service and your rate analysis work that's done. Right, and in the 4 phases, this will be, good news to that degree because there's a lot of deferral out of those 4 phases that's beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay, so the wastewater. So as I mentioned, there's some similarities here on the wastewater side, and there's some differences. So in the wastewater side, the top 2 lines are exactly the same as the water, previous from 2008, and then also the initial projection we did as part of the master plan, which makes sense. It's the same approach that was used on both of those. And then the revised approach, and again, it's this thinking of what could happen versus, okay, what do we think is more likely to happen, especially with where wastewater flows are going. We're seeing a lot less flow into the wastewater system. So the revised projection there is shown, but really the next couple slides are where you really get into how it drives the CIP. So, yeah, yes, sir.
Sorry. Again,
We're here
so
for
I know what the question is. The Newland project, how much additional flow would they project based on their units, so that I can get a percentage of that? Any idea?
We're gonna do some quick math.
Good.
Units times the unit factor, and we'll rough it out for you. Maybe can I explain this and then?
Oh, yes, by all means, let them.
All right, yeah, so we can use your time effectively.
Yeah.
Questions on the research. So with wastewater, there's a couple different types of flow that we look at. We look at the average flows, and that really tells us how much operation costs because it occurs over the year. This is also very helpful for reuse because it tells us how much we can reliably reuse every day of the year. For CIPs, the second is actually the more critical. So peak wet weather and peak dry weather more drive the CIP. So we have the, pause there.
So Director Hernandez on the wastewater side, we're probably in the 500,000 to 700,000 gallon range for wastewater for the Newland Sierra project.
So it's, I do the math, but it's less than 10%. If we're at 9.5 million, that's what I see we're at. Am I reading the chart right? About 9.5 million gallons per day?
Right now, we're about 7.
About 7?
Right now, we're at 7.
Right.
Oh, the 7 now, and we're projecting. Yeah.
All the way out to 2040.
I'm sorry?
All the way out to 2040 is not.
Oh, heavens, yes, yeah, we're over here, so we're at 7, and so about a 10% increase.
About that, yeah.
Thank you very much.
So we look at two different things. Really what's driving the CIP in the wastewater system are peak flows, both peak dry and peak wet weather. So one of the things that we have is on these lines, we show the wet weather, the top lines, the dry weather, the below lines, and these are peaks. So you can imagine almost like early in the morning, usually in the wastewater systems, everyone gets up, showers, we have some really big peaks. That's what's driving the size of the pipelines. And then we have a storm event, similar to what we've had recently. You'll see the wet weather influence, it'll kick up, and we don't want spills occurring during that either. So we kind of have criteria for both of those things. So these two really drive the wastewater CIP, and what you can see with this one is because of the wet weather influence, we don't have as big a gap between the previous line and the revised line. So although we've captured it in the average flows, you saw that gap there, similar to water. When you peak it and then you add wet weather in, you start to diminish that impact of being able to defer a capital on the wastewater side. And there's a couple other factors that go along with that as well. Yes, sir.
Let me ask a question, between the wet weather and the dry weather. I'm obviously wrong in my thinking on this. I thought we had basically a closed system, in that we're not taking storm water and putting it in our sewers, and the amount of runoff that should be going into our sewer is negligent, but according to this, it's not.
Yep, you're absolutely right. It's supposed to be a closed system. You don't have a combined system. Some cities do across the country. Not many are left anymore, but water gets in nonetheless. It gets around the joints of the pipe. It gets in cracked manholes. Actually, one of the biggest causes is sewer laterals on private property. So you'll get water that sinks in through the ground around everyone's home. We'll get in through some of the laterals. Is it a majority of the flow? You know, it's not. It's usually about a factor of 2, so usually double. And your fight is always to try to keep the sewer system as tight as you possibly can. Make sure that the pipes aren't aging, that you're replacing pipes that are getting old. Make sure that that we're not getting root intrusion, that it's cracking pipes, offering areas for water to get in. But every wastewater master plan, you're going to see a wet weather component to it pretty consistently with what's in there. And you'll see the results. If you go and look at your flow results from your flow meters, like even from the past rains, you'll always see an uptick of once the rains start. But you're right, it's not direct flow. There's not supposed to be any storm systems, any roof gutters, any kind of street drainage or anything coming into it. This is just from what you get from inflow and infiltration into the system.
And the difference between dry weather and 8 weather is 8 MGD?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of water.
It's a lot of water. This is the fight every agency has, is to keep that water out of their system.
Actually, and our system's actually not that bad. Our system's, relatively speaking, is tight.
Okay. But these are the numbers we're using.
Yeah, I mean, typically it only lasts for the duration of the storm too, so.
Correct.
It's not like it's a long duration.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a traffic jam on a freeway. It's that's what, clogs up the pipe, that's what the design criteria. So we try to make sure that the wet weather, we keep it down as much as possible in systems. So, but it drives a lot of the capital, and there's a lot of risks usually when you have your spills during wet weather type conditions. So there's a little change on the wastewater side, and there's a couple things too that you guys have on the wastewater side that also dictated it. Now, the staff, because the wastewater is a little easier to see, and a lot of your wastewater is in two big components. It's in your treatment and Encina, and it's in your land outfall. So this is a little different from the water system, where it's a spread out distribution system with a lot of facilities. So when we did the initial CIP projections on the wastewater side, staff also had a good knowledge of, okay, I see what the modelers are saying, but we can also see how much flow we have in those pipes. We're metering it, we're watching it. They actually deferred a lot of the wastewater CIP prior to our first go-around of this. So staff did a good job of already deferring some of that. So some of the deferrals, they've already happened. And then when you couple it with we're not really reducing a lot of flow, that's why you don't see a lot of change in the wastewater side. And you can see by this graph, the wastewater treatment and the land outfall, those are two areas that you want to get right, because if you don't get those right, you're going to spend a lot more money dealing with them if they're not appropriately sized. So when we look at kind of the risk reward of, are we being too conservative on the wastewater side? We're right at the limit where we're not sure we want to put you in that position of adding risk to you, of deferring more on that wastewater side. On the water side, it was a good position for you all to be in. The projections look good. We can defer $100 million of CIP from there.
Question.
Yes, sir.
The land outfall requirement, if I remember correctly, is a necessity when we get to 75% of our, no, need some primer on when and why the outfall is going to be necessary.
Director Hannon, so the 75% requirement is a treatment capacity requirement in Encina. Once you hit 75% of your treatment capacity, then you're obligated, based on the agreements with Encina, to start looking at the next expansion of what to do or how to resolve this issue, because it takes a long time to do an expansion or to do work in Encina. That it's not something that you can turn around in a year or two. So at 75% in theory, that gives you a good run-up before you hit that 100%.
I think it's also required by the regional board. It's
Yes,
usually,
that's where I was going
usually in the
next.
discharge order.
And the expansion is either we expand our sewer treatment, where's the expansion take place?
Primary for us is some liquids handling and solids treatment.
So we would need to increase our sewer treatment plant?
Yep.
Is that what you're saying?
Or at Encina in theory.
Purchase either more capacity
Or
from
expand.
one of the other member agencies that's not using something,
Or expand.
or expand the facility itself.
Yep.
Tell me then when and why the outfall is necessary.
Sure. James will go more into the outfall, but as you can see, you can go back to those peak numbers. Our outfall currently has capacity around 12.9, a little over 13, MGD.
The one we have
The
presently.
one we have presently, and you can see when we peak already, we have managed that flow currently so we don't spill. Because during those peaks, now granted, it may be 30 minutes once a year, if you have a real dry year, or maybe like this year, several times already this year, our staff has to manage those flows and kind of route that sewer flow, open valves very slowly to make sure they kind of manage those peaks, or else we spill, or have potential to spill at the outfall. We surcharged this year. Now, this is based on our design criteria. We could force those pipes to take a little bit more, but we're just one little hiccup on spilling, as the board may recall, when the spill that we did have, once it starts spilling, there's no stopping. It's Russian roulette at that point. So the design criteria is not overly conservative. It's actually standard in the industry. And with the standard, our capacity is below our peaks currently. That's why a portion of the outfall needs to be necessary. Also, there's several things going on. What we have with the outfall is a very complicated project. There's pressurized sections, there's gravity sections, there's other agencies that join in it, and all those things are on the table right now. And staff is working with staff at Buena, City of Vista, and also Carlsbad to help resolve some of those issues. But currently, if you look at the numbers today, we peak above our outfall capacity.
Yeah, we're, if I'm reading this correctly, just at 25. Am I, that right?
That's
25
peak.
million?
That's instantaneous, yes, peak wet weather. So obviously with us holding water back, using our lift stations to route water to Meadowlark, doing this sort of thing, we shave the tops off those peaks. And we see 15, 16, 17, 18 MGD of instantaneous at the outfall, which surcharges the manholes.
Right.
Currently. So I'm getting data right now from our staff, because it takes a while for that wet weather to soak in, especially after all the drought that we've had. But they're seeing well above 12 MGD currently.
And I know this is the conservative view, but are there alternatives that we could look at that may not be as costly as the additional outfall?
The outfall is probably your best bang for your buck, unless something like DPR or something like that becomes a reality. And we'll talk more about that in the water resources, because recycled water doesn't do anything to relieve the outfall. Recycled water doesn't help you, because during a major rain event, you still have to send that sewer down to the sea.
Right.
So, but if you had a water treatment plant, which would cost a lot more than $31 million, and you had any way to treat that into DPR, then we're talking.
Yeah, then you wouldn't need the outfall, the parallel outfall.
So you can say, you spend 150, say 31. So, I don't know.
Okay, I get it now.
Question. So you said that our current capacity at U was 13,
Roughly, a little under, yes.
and we're showing right now that we use, in dry weather, 18?
Peak dry weather, 17 judge.
Okay, so how much of that's being diverted to Meadowlark?
So Meadowlark has a liquids capacity of 8 million gallons. So we are allowed to, we can take our local flows that naturally flow to Meadowlark, and also the pump flows from what we call our Quest Stadium lift station, which is out there kind of east of San Luis Hills, and of course Lake San Marcos, along with basically, this is how we manage the flow. We scout off the outfall, we turn on our lift station 1, which is right off San Marcos Boulevard, to relieve the outfall, and we pump that over to Meadowlark. And we can get 8 million gallons a day worth of capacity, I don't know what that is in gallons per minute, to Meadowlark to handle as liquids. Then we send 3 out through our fail-safe system, all the way out, it pumps it from Meadowlark all the way out to the ocean outfall in Encino. And we treat 5 for recycled water, which is our treatment capacity for recycled water, and we send that to Mara Reservoir. That's how what we do is we kind of manage the peaks, and that's how we manage the peaks to not overflow the outfall when necessary. We haven't had to do that much since it's been fairly dry.
Right.
So
So that's included in these figures, obviously, because you're showing already that
This is a total.
you're already showing a deficit that you'd always be filled if it wasn't for Meadowlark.
Yeah, so even in these figures, for example, we're taking somewhere between 4 and 5 to Meadowlark off those numbers.
Okay, so that's how we're doing it with Meadowlark right now. And Meadowlark's at full capacity.
Meadowlark has the ability to, we don't have the sewer flow all the time, because you have to remember, these peaks are instantaneous, they may last minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. So it's not like we have that flow constantly. So we're getting roughly 4 million gallons a day of recycled water capacity. Right now, though, because it's raining, Meadowlark's down in the 2s, because nobody has that need, so we send everything out through the outfall.
Right.
And would you give me those numbers? Encino's capacity was it 13 or 15?
No, our outfall capacity at our bottleneck, which is our siphon A, which runs from the Laurels all the way to El Camino Real, 14,000 feet roughly, is about under 13 million gallons.
Just shy.
Yeah, 12, you had that one? 12.7. 12.7.
12.7 million, and 5 million we can divert to Meadowlark.
Meadowlark has, yes, roughly about 100.
Okay, so
Really about 3.5 to 4.
3.5. Well, let's be conservative. 3.5. So that's 2. So 9.2 million we're being sending to and seen it all the time. That's the difference between
Yeah, and
3.5 from 7, 12.
Just to be clear, it's not all the time, these are just peak, that's that
Okay.
level of service during rush hour. We're talking about handle.
Well, that's what we have to gauge though, is the peak. Can't worry about the normal because we have to build for the peak. Right.
Yeah, unless you want-
I got that part for sure.
Okay, while you're up, James, so Meadowlark is only functional as long as we have a place to put it. So, as long as we have McMar to put water into, otherwise, there's no point in us taking the water
No,
at
we actually
Meadowlark.
have an agreement, we actually thought about, we actually have an agreement with the city of Carlsbad, we could actually divert recycled water through Carlsbad, through their system out to the Carlsbad outlet, outfall, which goes to the ocean outfall. So if Mar was full, you had the perfect storm scenario, excuse the pun, where Mar was full, it's raining cats and dogs, and you have a peak wet weather event, we're sending 3 out to our fail-safe, which is the capacity of what the pumps can do. Using Carlsbad's system, we can get rid of the other 5 also. So in theory, we can take all 8, process it through Meadowlark, and get rid of it into the ocean in a permitted legal way.
Okay, and what's McMar's capacity?
Mars, 54 million gallons when full.
Thank you.
All right, so I think this is where, and this is just a summary, just like on the water side of the wastewater capital. I think in the next slide, yes, okay, so here, this is the buildup of everything. This is the water, this is the wastewater. And then again, the good news is that the deferral of about 100 million of CIP, with a majority of it beyond the 2035. So some of it's deferred between phases, but a majority of it, I think 65 million, is deferred out to ultimate. So hopefully this is good news. It certainly is a benefit. So we don't want to spend money if we don't need to spend money. We look at what's likely versus what could happen. We feel confident about putting our name on this recommendation as well that says this is a reasonable approach for the district to take. So I believe, yes, okay, so next steps. Finalize the CIP descriptions. This, of course, would be with the board's blessing that this approach is the appropriate approach for the district. Once those are finalized, we'd add the CIPs and get through the supplemental environmental impact report that's ongoing. That's, as you can see right now as well. Finalize the master plan report. It's pretty much, we've got it ready to go. We're just waiting for making sure we have this updated process that's consistent with the direction you want to do. Get the CIPs updated, get it punched in, and get this thing finalized and locked down for you. And then, of course, the completed and approved supplemental EIR, that's a process that works after the master plan is completed, so that would follow right behind it and get that completed as well. Is that, yes?
Questions?
Yes.
I'm still grappling with the differential between 14 and 17. Is there an amendment, a supplement, something that we can put together that adds to the 2014, so that our ratepayers, I mean, when I mentioned that we're doing a master plan 2014, everybody looks at me and goes, what the hell, that's 3 years ago, what are you talking about, master plan? A little tardy, Jim. So, does anyone do an amendment?
Well, I was going to say, one thing, I'll give you a perspective of what most agencies do, and James can give you this. It's one thing you guys do that's unusual is your master plans, you name them the date that the data was from. It's the same process that everyone uses, but it's pretty rare that you would call this, like typically for an agency, we wouldn't call this a 2014 master plan. This would be a 2017 master plan, but the data that led up to it is your best data set up to. It's always at least a year behind, if not a couple. And you have data from 2015 on the population data built into this. Your unit data, yeah, just because it goes through 2014, that's not total water use. That water use through 2014 was just to look at how people were using water and the trends. It was aggregated over 6 years. So again, that doesn't mean that this is outdated to 2014 and doesn't have those numbers in it. And it has the approved land use up to the latest documents that are in there, so that 2014 is a little misleading. So if you wanted just a recommendation, based on kind of more industry standards, I think you get away from aligning the date to what some data set was used versus when it's being published. And you can always amend your master plans with updates to data in the CIPs as you go along. So in fact, what staff will do is they're always looking at, this is a guidance document, it's not perfection. They're only done once every 5 years. Staff is always looking at the capital improvement programs and making adjustments and saying, you know what, it might have said we needed 5 million gallons, but if something changes, there's no trigger that says they can't make an adjustment, say, we need a 4 million gallon tank, not a 5 million gallon tank, and make the appropriate calls there. So again, these are just, guidance documents to do that. So I think that offers you a little flexibility that you don't have to view this as
I
that.
see James has a bit of an answer.
Just to confirm what James is saying, you're absolutely right, it's just a naming. We can call it 2017, but your data is still from 2014, it's just how we've traditionally done it. And yes, it does add some confusion, so that's something that we talk about changing. What we also do, which a lot of other agencies do, is when a developer comes in, or any development comes in, we do a little study that kind of makes them whole with the master plan. So if they're doing something different from the master plan, and there's adjustments made, there's a written document, a study, what we call a water sewer study. Some agencies call them SAP, sub-area master plans, that we do, that kind of makes them whole. It sets their conditions and makes them whole to the master plan. So if they're doing exactly what the master plan projected they were doing, the document would say exactly what the master plan says. If they're doing something different, we capture those differences, so this way it's documented, the developer has a chance to review it, see what those differences are, comment on them, meet with us on them, and then move forward. We end up basically finalizing the document, getting the developer's blessing. Sometimes they're not happy about it, but we still get their blessings. And then we move forward with their conditions, and that's what it's based on, so they understand where that comes from, what the difference is between what is they're proposing and what was planned. So this way, everything's in writing and documented.
So that in fact would be the amendment to the
That
plan.
is, so every little development that comes in, it changes, because things change, the city gives bonuses, the city gives SBAs. Those are captured through that process.
And in the case of Newland Sierra, do they submit that now, or do they wait till they're approved and submit it, or is it just their choice when they want to do that?
So Newland Sierra is a great example there. Yes, we have done a water and sewer study for that development here, which shows, okay, if they were to come in at the proposed densification that they're projecting, this is what it would be as far as demand increase, and these would be conditions here that they would need to meet.
And they would handle those conditions?
That's correct.
So that our ratepayers don't have to worry about whether it's coming in or not?
Right.
As long as we have the water and the capacity in Encina, they do whatever is necessary to get it to their facility at no cost to our ratepayers.
Correct, yeah, so the water supply there, obviously, that's another different study that's going on, but as long as, the water supply is there, the water and sewer study will set the conditions there
Okay.
for what they need.
Good. All right. Thank you.
I have a question. Actually, you just said that other agencies, or a majority of agencies, would call this a 2017. They would not call it a 2014, not use the snapshot date. And I'm assuming that in the past, we've always used the snapshot date. So what would the benefit have been to staff, or to the council, but probably staff, as to doing that?
Well, I think one of them is you already get a question of, wait a minute, this is 2014, you guys are 3 years late in getting your master plan out. Can I trust what's in there because it's 3 years late?
Right.
I think it sounds like you've already kind of seen that or heard that or got some feedback from it. So I
Right.
think that's the biggest benefit right there is, and again, every agency we work with, they have different customs that they've had for a long time. There's nothing wrong that says you can't call it 2014, but that's not the typical. For most agencies, we would call this the 2017 master plan, or maybe the 2016
Well,
master plan.
I think you'd call it the draft master plan, until you adopt it. And then it becomes the 2017 or the 2016, or whenever you adopt it. It's just in a draft form up until that point. I do think, because it takes time to run all these models, so it does take a year or two so you do have this snapshot in time to be able to look at things. I get that part of it, but I've also shared the frustration that, I feel like I'm arguing something in front of the judge that's why is it old, you know, or why, is there something, you know, and it's just been the way we've done it.
And Steph did meet with the consultant last week, and we had this very conversation, what should we be calling this? Because it does seem to be maybe a little bit misleading to the public that may pick it up and say, why is it 3 years old? So that's certainly something we can talk about, what we're gonna call it. As long as somewhere in the document it explains what is it based on. It needs to be clear that you're using data up to a certain point in time, and don't indicate that you're using data that's up to like March 2017, because it
Well,
doesn't.
yeah, and the data sets in there, like you pointed out, they could be different dates for different types of data. too.
Correct.
It's like the land use could come from a certain year, but other things could be later or earlier. So I think it's beneficial to kind of point that out.
Good.
All right, well, if I could just make one note, you know, these processes are very interactive with staff. I do want to appreciate Rob and his team. They actually did a lot of work behind the scenes too, so it wasn't just us running off and doing this stuff. So appreciate their efforts in helping us through and a lot of the background data that they have as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're gonna switch gears on you now and look at the water resources plan.
Okay, so I'm going to prepare the next presentation here for Mr. Kevin Davis.
All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity to meet with you about this. That was very interesting, that last presentation, so hopefully this will follow in that same vein. And so what we want to talk about here is really, I want to set the stage for where we are today. We'll talk about the water resource options that we've looked at. We'll look at local water supply options, and then we'll kind of look at what are your real reality for potential recycled water delivery to the district here, or the agency. And then finally, we'll talk about some recommendations, and hopefully we'll be able to chart a course in the direction you want to go. So where are we, and what was the scope? We really put this on hold for a little while, and as Director Hernandez knows, we had a drought to deal with, and you know, I had some conversations about that. And so that was put on hold. We're back in the swing of things. We were, in the meantime, while we were looking at the drought, we looked at some water resource options, and we updated those. We also looked at some conditions for reuse. Things have changed, and we updated those as well. So today's presentation, we're going to review the water resource options. We will review the refined reuse opportunities. You'll see that we have some of those identified, and they kind of they build on what you guys have already looked at before. And then, like I said, we'll talk about some recommendations. This is just kind of a graphical way of looking at where we are today. We started with a scope of work. There were previous studies that were done. We looked at those previous studies. We documented those. We're working on some grant funding here, so that'll help pay for this. And then we looked at some new opportunities. There was an initial workshop, a second workshop. This is the third workshop where we're refining those options. And really the goal of the study isn't to say this is exactly what you're going to do, but more these are the directions that we should be going, and these are the steps that we should be taking to refine that. And today, we'll review those findings and then come up with some a way to chart that course. So by way of water resources update, so these are the global options that you have and that you've looked at. And you've done some work, and you should acknowledge that. So a couple of things that are done that you guys are very successful at is you've increased the irrigation efficiency, which is terrific, especially in the world we live in today with limited water resources. And you made a connection to the Leeuwenhoek water treatment plant, which gives you some additional supply and some additional redundancy in your system. And then you have the desalination deal, which is augmenting your supply with a local supply, which is terrific. Some other things that have been looked at is, we'll start with the first one there, which is groundwater banking. And groundwater banking can be challenging because we don't have big groundwater basins here in San Diego County. Not on the order of magnitude for groundwater banking. So we see these outside the area. And so in order for you to make a groundwater banking program successful, you really need to work with another agency. And so that adds some complications. Another thing we looked at was the Escondido VID transfer, where you could potentially purchase water. You have a question?
Can I ask a question about groundwater banking?
Sure.
Because I find the term interesting.
Okay.
And understanding what to do with the bank. But for instance, this last week I was at a conference where they were talking about banking into Lake Mead, and how much Arizona had banked and how much different people have banked, Mexico has banked.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when you get to 1325, the bank door is closed. I'm trying to understand, which would be the same thing with us banking somewhere. If you bank and everyone runs out of water, your bank door is closed. You're not getting any water from that either. Would that be correct?
That could be true. In the case of what we were looking at, we were actually looking at groundwater banking where you would own that water. So if you...
We would own the bank?
Yeah, you would own the portion of water that you put into that bank. So you basically are putting this in a groundwater basin. It's not in an open reservoir. It doesn't evaporate. You could have losses other direct from...
If it was our own bank. Someone else's bank, we don't really control it.
They
In
can't
theory,
give away
you
your...
do.
In theory, they can't give away your water. So
Lake Mead does all the
you would
time.
you would pay to put it there, you would pay to store it there, and you would pay to bring it back.
Well, Lake Mead does it all the time. They're overdrawn. They're overdrawn by
Yeah,
a couple
so-
100 million gallons. I'm just saying, I don't understand.
I think I understand what you're saying. I don't have an answer for that. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, if somebody gives away your water, then you would.
Well, it's something we're not looking at doing.
Well,
so-
but to clarify, if I heard you, somehow we would need to get water and push it into their groundwater basin.
That's exactly correct.
And then we would have claim to that, so it would be our bank. They would, unless they stole our money.
No, but they loan it out like Lake Mead, doesn't have it.
No,
If
forget
everyone-
Lake Mead, this is our little bank, not Lake Mead. If we
It's the
were
same
to,
thing.
to find, either, if I'm reading this correctly, through Vista or Escondido, if we found some water and put it into their groundwater basin, it's ours into their, it's just holding it for us. We could gather it later.
That's theoretically correct, yes. And my guess is you wouldn't be able to do that with those agencies, but like Semitropic or some of these other large groundwater basins, you could. And in those basins, it's exactly like Director Hernandez said. You would, like in a year like now, when we have lots of water, Met's going to try and sell you water cheap. They're going to say, hey, you can buy this water, you can put it in Semitropic. Semitropic's going to say, okay, we're going to sell you this storage. We're going to put it in the ground for you, and when you're ready, we'll pull it out. And then you pay a fee for them to wheel it back to you. And you have
Where is
water.
Semitropic located?
Central Valley area.
Yeah.
How do you get water there, though?
Well,
I don't get
I think
that.
the
From the
difference
state water
with
project.
banking and surface water is that you're subject to the whims of drought cycles. So you may have that, you may own that water on paper, but if the Colorado River Basin's in a drought, then, you know, you're subject to nature, and your water isn't available until that condition changes.
So if you
Unlike a-
underground bank it, once you bank it, it's there.
Yeah.
They can't use it.
Well,
Like Lake Mead.
it can't disappear from evaporation due to drought either. I mean, you're really subject to that.
But you're still, if there was a major earthquake and the.
Yeah,
I mean,
certainly
It's not
other-
Something
everything
could
I
happen,
see
yeah.
insured
That's
like
right,
like your money is in the bank.
I mean, it's
So then-
it's not fail-safe.
So we would allocate water coming down from the state
That's right.
into the Central Valley.
That's right.
And
And they would infiltrate.
they would
into
hold
the
it, and
ground.
then when we wanted, they'd pump it to us.
That's correct. That's and people do that. This isn't like a new concept.
Yeah.
I mean, they actually sell groundwater banking rights to you.
Mhm.
They coordinate it. So
And
that you
direct-
own that piece of water.
Director Hernandez, sometimes it's not always the same molecule of water, so the water may get stored in their basin.
Right.
And when we want our water, they don't necessarily have to pump it out. We may take their allocation of new water coming down the state water
I get-
project,
right.
and they can draw more out of the groundwater
Mhm.
basin.
All right.
It's just a paper accounting
Uh-huh,
mechanism.
okay.
There's a lot of costs associated with that, and you have to coordinate with other agencies. So moving to Escondido, the transfer there would be that you could get water through the Escondido VID water treatment plant, through the flume. Right now, the city of Escondido is working on a potable reuse program. I think most of you know that. And so the water that goes through the Escondido VID water treatment plant will now be, well, at some point in the near future, would eventually be potable reuse. And when it is, it's gonna be, it'll go through the regulations for potable reuse. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later. The point being that it's gonna be different than it is today. And whether or not they will have, how the city and this irrigation district want to transfer that water in the future is unknown. They're looking for their own water supplies. They may not be interested in selling water to you for that purpose. We also looked at the Oceanside wastewater treatment plant. That's another option. One of the drawbacks to that is it's not a new water supply. It's basically offsetting water that they would be using. It's imported water that comes from basically Met largely, and so you're not really developing a local water supply there.
Oh, quick question.
Yes,
Isn't that the same as the Liebenheim to us now?
it is.
It's
It
not
is the same.
necessarily a new, I've been arguing that with staff. That's not a new water supply.
It's
Because
not
it
a-
comes from Met.
It's not a new water supply to the region. It is a new connection
To
point
us.
for you.
Right, but to the region,
That's right.
Met runs out of water, they run out of water.
That's true. And then we have the recycled water from Escondido. So Escondido has a recycled water program right now, a non-potable reuse program. Right now, they're struggling, or they will be struggling in the future to supply all their own needs during the summer as the peak demands come. And so there's not a lot of water to go around in the summer when you would need it the most, and so it may not work out as well as we'd like. And then there's the Twin Oaks Valley Recycled Water Facility, and that facility was in previous studies deemed too costly. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that later, so we can hold the conversation on that till then. So a couple other things to talk about for additional water resources. The desalination plant at Carlsbad is a new water supply. You have to deal with that plant, which is great. In 2025, there's another additional opportunity, and should Vallecitos decide to engage in that, there's another opportunity to get some more desalinated water. That would be a local water supply for you. Now, how does that work? And there's some numbers here, and I'll walk you through these. Right now, you have about 3,500 acre feet, or 2,170 gallons per minute. Or that's what we could increase to. And then a Liebenhain supply is about 1,708 gallons per minute. So if you add those two together, that gives us what we would have already. And then if we look at the demands in the south and the central areas, where this would be the easiest to connect to, we find out that those demands are about 5,748 gallons per minute. And so, and this is on average, it's not instantaneous. And if you take the delta between the 3,500 plus the 1,708, subtract that from the 5,748, what that leaves you with is 1,870 gallons per minute of additional desal that you could get to meet your supply demands in the future. Now, if you wanted more than that, and it's available, then we would need to move the water into the northern area. So, so maybe you could even get more than the roughly 2,000 GPM.
Quick question, when you say, we take our water right now on Cherokee, which is in the central area, but the majority of that water is sent up to Twin Oaks now. Isn't there a connection somewhere between there and Cherokee that we could take that water from northern?
Yeah, James.
Director Martin, so right now, the water that we take from Cherokee actually serves the whole central area. It serves what we call the 920 zone, which is basically the 78 corridor, where about 80% of our population lives. That water is serving those areas and the Lake San Marcos area, and then it's being pumped up into the Coronado Hills area. So that's where the desal water, the water that we get in the central area primarily goes. We have a connection up at Twin Oaks and a pipeline that brings water down. So before we had the desal connection, the way we move water was we fill up our large storage tanks, and then we bring water down into that area via gravity, because we didn't have to pump anything. Now that we have desal, we bring a lot less water down, but we still have the ability to. If we were to double our desal supplies, ideally we want to pump it over to that storage, because again, as Kevin mentioned, these are average, not peaks, so we need a pump station to pump it to our large storage tanks. So this way we'd actually have desal from the north all the way down to the central at that point. The hills that kind of separate San Juan Hills is the geographical obstacle of making it all the way down to the south without additional pumping. So right now, we kind of serve the central with desal. The north is served through our Twin Oaks tanks, and the south is served through our connection with Olympic.
So to serve north would require not only a pump station, but additional pipe?
With desal. No, the pipe's there, just a pump station.
Just a
We
pump
just
station.
reverse the flow.
You couldn't put an additional the water authority couldn't put an additional turnout on the supply of.
We already have connection in the north and the central. So, but if we were to double the desal connection to utilize it, we'd have to pump it up to the north. Or wheeling costs through the
Yeah.
water authority.
We have a wheeling charge if we took it off of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the pump station pays for itself fairly quick. We did the math before. We just didn't have the demand at this time.
Doing the math here, between the 3,500 and the 1,870, that equates to, if I did my math correctly, about 7,280 acre feet a year increase. And I just did 1,870 per minute times an hour times a day times 365 divided by, I rounded it to 135,000 gallons per acre foot. And that was the correct math? If I did, follow that correctly?
I'm not, could you say the total number you had there?
The 1870.
1,870 per minute times 60 minutes is an hour, times 24 hours is a day, times 365 is a year, and you divide that by 135,000, I rounded that up, to gallons per acre foot. That's 7,280 acre feet additional of desal opportunity. And so where I'm going with that, that's double the opportunity, because we're getting about 3,500 acre feet right now. So that's a double the opportunity virtually in 2025. Is that?
I think that there might be something wrong there, because at
Okay.
3,500 acre feet a year, that's 2170 GPM. And so this is less than that by about 300 GPM, so we're probably around 2,900 acre feet.
2,900 acre feet.
Additional.
1870 is about 8 acre feet a day.
Okay. 8 acre feet a day, all right. Yeah. Did my math wrong somewhere in here, okay. Okay. All right.
Okay, all right, so we can move on here. So the water resources options, groundwater banking we looked at, other agency partnerships we've looked at, desalination, we've got some options, and there's some recycled water options. So I wanted to explore that along with other local water supplies. So when we think of local water supplies here in this area, we think of wastewater that we have as a supply option, stormwater, which right now it's looking pretty good. A couple months from now might not be. And then we have dry weather runoff. So when we get that, they like to call the urban drool, we have that as a resource as well. So we'll look at all three of those. So wastewater as a source. So let's talk about that. If you look at this graph here, you'll see that we're projecting the average annual wastewater flows. And when we think about recycled water, we look at wastewater a little bit different typically than when we're looking at it for the siphon that you looked at earlier today. When we're dealing with an outfall, we're dealing with wastewater treatment as a need, then we're looking at what is the peak wet weather flow, okay? When we're looking at recycled water, we're gonna make an investment in a treatment plant and in pipelines and in sales. We wanna know what we can actually deliver on a regular basis, okay? And we have to also recognize, and this isn't in this study, or in this graphic here, but we also have to recognize that if we're using it for non-potable uses, those uses are the largest in the summer when it's hot, and they're the smallest in the winter when it's raining. And so we look at average annual wastewater flows here in these projections, and you can see that they range here from about 7 million gallons a day now, all the way up to the ultimate, which will be around, say, 15 or 14.5 million gallons a day. So on average, you have that much wastewater coming in to your service area. Okay, and you're dealing with that one way or another. You're either sending it to Encina for treatment, or you're treating it, you're selling it, you're wholesaling it, and we'll talk about that. So we'll come back to these numbers a little bit, but I just want to point out that we don't have an unlimited supply, and our supplies start right now at around, say, 7 million gallons a day. And right now you have a metal arc plant. You're delivering about 5 million gallons a day in tertiary effluent to your partners in Carlsbad and Olivine. And so that doesn't leave a lot of extra wastewater. And remember, when we treat wastewater, we're getting losses, right? We're taking the solids out, we're taking, so there's some losses there. So there's not a lot of wastewater today. But if we plan today for where we're going to be in the future, there might be a good opportunity. Now, and obviously one of the greatest benefits of recycled water as a water resource is that you control your own supplies, right? You're generating them, and you're selling them the water, and now you're cleaning up the wastewater and you're selling them the water again. So it's a revenue source. It also has the potential to reduce the downstream treatment. Now, I'm not saying that we're there today, and we're going to, as we walk through this, you'll see some options that do that, like James mentioned earlier, with direct potable reuse or even indirect potable reuse, but non-potable reuse doesn't really do that. And the reason for that is because when it's raining cats and dogs, not a lot of people are turning on their irrigation system. You're not getting rid of that water, but you got to get rid of it. Otherwise, you're going to flood and you're going to have spills and stuff like that. So we got to be real clever on how we do that. And long term, you're going to get more flow. So those are all terrific. Now, some of the challenges are you don't have a lot of availability today. That could change. And then the capacity at Metal Arc is somewhat limited. Right now, you're treating about 5 million gallons a day at a pretty tight site there. With the conventional treatment, we could probably get that up to around 6.5 million gallons a day. And that's going to be important because we'll come back and we'll talk about what we could do with that 1.5 million gallons if we want to expand that plant. We'll also talk about a cost associated with that. And then treatment in the ocean disposal still needs to be available to you, and treatment being an Encina and the conveyance to get it down there as your fail-safe if something did happen. So you need to have capacity for all of it. Yes.
Just wanted to clarify something you said. You said Metal Arc has a total capacity of 6.5 million gallons per day, or I've always
No,
heard
it could be expanded to that as on the tertiary system.
Okay.
So you have, I think, James, you mentioned 8 MGD of wastewater treatment to secondary treatment.
Mhm.
Secondary treatment is suitable for ocean discharge. And then if we only have 5 MGD of tertiary treatment, which is suitable for the recycle.
I got you. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So let's talk about the Escondido water resources. So Escondido, I said, has a recycled water system. In 2008, there was a master plan that said, hey, we could probably use about 477 acre feet per year of additional water that we could get from Escondido to sell. And then that was updated in the North San Diego Water Reuse Coalition project. They found about another 300 or 400 additional acre feet of potential use. And so there's a non-potable system out there that's been identified, and we'll cut to the chase later, so I don't want to belabor this, but there are benefits to looking at this partnership with Escondido. The challenge is, and the benefits, I'll just say, are really economy of scale. The better economy of scale you have, the cheaper things are. That's our reality. But Escondido's looking at using most of their recycled water, so I don't think they're going to have that available. I mean, we could explore it more, but it's probably not going to be there. And when they have the greatest demands is exactly when you want to use it too, which is in the summer. So Encina is looking at a recycled water plan right now, and this graphic that we have here, this is what it might have looked like a year ago when we were looking at that project. It's probably going to be very different. I think you guys are going to see some evidence of that on Wednesday. I think they have there some reports. So don't look for this graphic. It won't be there, I'm sure. I'm guessing they'll have something different. However, so let's talk about why Encina makes sense as a recycled water source. Biggest thing is economy of scale. They got a large facility, they've got land over there, they've already got a big rec plant, and then adding the recycled water step to that is more cost effective than building all the treatment plant steps from start to finish to expand it. It's a regional collaboration, which means you got other people helping pay for this. And the timing might be really good for that. It might even be right for DPR sometime in the future. Some of the challenges are Encina's not your next door neighbor, they're a little bit further down, and you gotta pump uphill to get it here. And then, and so that actually obviously adds some energy costs. Okay, so those are big picture, and I don't want you to think we're not gonna talk more about recycled water, because we are. But let's shift gears for a minute, and let's talk about stormwater and urban runoff. So stormwater is a tricky thing, because when it rains in Southern California, it sometimes rains a lot. And trying to capture all that water, if we could capture all of it, it'd be great, right? We'd be able to use it for a long time. The problem is it takes a lot of money to build the storage facilities to capture that much water. And I think we've invested a lot in San Vicente and other local regional supplies, but or storage reservoirs, but it's hard to site it, it's hard to flood an area that's not flooded environmentally, so it's a challenge. So in looking at your options, we looked at a couple of different areas that exist, and we'll talk more about that. But that infrastructure to capture stormwater is expensive. And then obviously there's lots of benefits to it. It can supplement a non-potable reuse supply, right? So if you had some stormwater capture, you could put that into your treatment plant and get it sent off to use it for irrigation uses. And actually stormwater in some cases, depending on when it is in the rain cycle, can actually improve your water quality. The salt concentration is often less. When it's at the very beginning of the rain cycle, it's terrible. It's got a lot of oils and other types of contaminants in it, but shortly after that first couple of rains, you start getting some really good water quality, so it's a very nice thing. So we talked about, the other thing I didn't talk about from a challenge is water rights. In some cases, the rain in a catchment basin is spoken for, and so you have, in some cases, adjudicated basins, and you have to be careful about how you divert that water from natural runoff.
Question?
Yes?
We don't have an adjudicated basin here. Do we have to worry about water rights for our district on stormwater?
I think you will.
Really?
I don't know the answer, so I don't want to give you confidence that I know that. I think you might. It depends on where you get it. If you're diverting something that's not supposed to be diverted, or typically has been diverted, you'll have agreements, or you'll have to do, you would have to do some homework on that. I don't know the answer.
And the diversion that you speak of is somewhere along San Marcos Creek between Twin Oaks Valley and the Meadowlark.
Right.
There's potentially a diversion of stormwater to somebody else.
That's correct.
And if we don't know of one, I don't know one specifically, but there may be one. But that would be the water rights that you're speaking of.
That's what I'm talking about right now.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well,
Yes.
those water rights also include well water.
It
We
would.
probably have 400 or 500 wells that no one
Yes.
knows where they are and never will, but are being used, and they're lowering, I'm sure. So that would be.
They could be challenged. There's lots of things that could be challenged,
Right.
and I'm not an attorney, so I don't.
But so that stormwater is somehow collected just from the
That's right.
rainfall,
Recharges.
gets down and
That's right.
recharges the basins that we don't have anyway.
That's exactly correct. So if we, just to clarify this, if we divert water that would have otherwise gone into the ground for whatever amount of water people are pumping or not pumping, and they challenge that and say, we've done something different, then there could be water rights issues associated with that. And I don't know the law on that, and I'm not an attorney, so I will just point out that they could be something we'd want to look at.
Okay.
Okay, so let's look at the two, there's a couple of places we can look at. Let's start with South Lake. South Lake has about a 200-acre watershed that feeds into that. It's about 75 million gallons, so that's 230 acre-feet of capacity. And it's in a location that we could actually make work. There are some great benefits to making sure that, that water goes there, and if you were to capture it, obviously it has recreational opportunities. We could use that water and use it for irrigation purposes, non-potable reuse. There are some challenges, and if we were to capture all the watershed and not let it overflow and really we'll work on focusing that water for this use. Right now, that water works its way down to Lake San Marcos, and they would be disappointed in not getting that water down there. And then the future, there has been some discussion about a park, and if we had a park and we were using this recycled water, this storm water, and using it for irrigation or other things, and we might draw down that lake level faster than the people who want to use that lake would like, and so that could cause some challenges. And just keep in mind, this is a very, very small lake, okay? This is 230 acre-feet, is very small. And I'll give you a couple of comparisons here. So if you've been up to Lake Dixon in Escondido, that's around 2,000 acre-feet, okay? And if you've been to San Vicente, okay, where we just raised the dam, that's gonna hold over 249,000 acre-feet, okay? So when you look at South Lake, it's really, really tiny. And so it creates some challenges from just practicality of, are you gonna make a big investment for such a small amount of water? So, yes?
Do you happen to know how big Santee, the lakes that they have, how many acre feet they are?
I might, let me think a second. They're much smaller.
Yeah.
First of all, they're not on the order of, they're probably combined close to 1,000 acre feet.
Okay.
So that's my guess, and I could actually look that up. I worked on those lakes.
Thank you.
But remember, those lakes are a flow-through treatment
Mhm.
system too. They're
I was gonna
not
say,
like a
that's
storage.
recycled water.
That's all recycled water.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, the other option is Lake San Marcos. It's larger. It's about, well, depending on what the level is, it's 400 to 700 acre feet. So it's significantly larger. It has water quality challenges, as I think all of us know. And there could be some potential for non-potable reuse really coming right out of that lake. But there are a lot of jurisdictional issues that you would want to really, really understand before you engage with that, particularly with the private ownership and the water quality challenges that they've got. So we looked at it, we know the size of it, but we'll let you decide how you want to handle that, but it doesn't look promising. Okay, so now let's talk about the dry weather runoff. And dry weather runoff, it's really from irrigation, right? It's overwatering, et cetera. And one of the options that you could do with the urban drill, if you will, is to divert that to a sewer. Now, you typically don't want stormwater going into your sewer. However, in the summer, when it's warm and not raining, there's typically lots of excess capacity. As you saw, we have to design for the peak weather flows. So in the summer, we probably have plenty of capacity for that. The other thing is that in the summer is when we have the lowest wastewater flows, and sometimes we need to augment that. So there's a nice combination between the urban drool and wastewater treatment for recycled water. Yes?
My understanding is that urban drool doesn't play nicely with our bugs in our treatment plant.
That's absolutely correct, and I was gonna mention that too.
Oh, okay.
But you're 100% right, and it depends on what the or what the flow rate is, and the ratio of that flow to your flow in your plant. So if you have a 5% urban rural contribution, it's probably not gonna matter. What happens is when you get too much of this water, the water that's coming out of the streams and the runoff doesn't have a lot of carbon in it. It's not wastewater. It has a lot of nitrogen, a lot of phosphorus, but it doesn't have the carbon source for the bugs, and that's where you can get into some trouble. So if there's too much of it, then it can cause a problem. It also has some other things we'd have to treat. So there's some challenges.
And also my understanding, again, from the conference I was just at,
Yeah.
is that now we're all gonna be marijuana growers. And as such, the waste coming from them could destroy our little germs that we now use.
Oh.
They're very toxic.
The nitrates
The right word?
Yeah.
from the
Nitrates,
fertilizers.
very
Oh,
strong
I see.
nitrates
From the
Yeah.
that have to be flushed.
But if you use
constantly.
the fertilizer from Encina, which is Class A, no
Yes,
and no
that's good
nitrates at all, just
We'll solve
plants
that
shoot
problem.
out of the sky.
Only if
That's-
On that 13 acres
Does
we own.
Encina take cash?
Yeah, they do. And on that 13 acres we own, yeah, we could be rolling in dough.
Okay, so good points. And the other thing that could be a challenge is as conservation really kicks in more. And it's raining right now, but it's not always raining here, and conservation measures may get tightened even further. And so that if you were making a big investment, expecting to be able to divert that in the summer, and then those runoff numbers go down, then you might have a stranded asset there. So there's obviously some challenges. And I think Director Hernandez brought up the point that if it needs to get into the ground, right, or maybe it's Director Martin, and we take that water out of there and it's not recharging the basin with these soft bottoms, then we could have water rights issues again. So we'll have to sort through that. Okay, so those are our options. Dry weather runoff, I kind of talked about this. It's cost effective when everything works out perfectly. It's not cost effective when it causes problems with downstream facilities, or you have to divert it a long direction before you can get it into an existing facility. One of the good things about it is that the cities are looking for solutions like that to meet their requirements from the regional board. They've got challenges. There's a lot of nutrient problems that the streams have. And as a result, the regional board has come out with requirements for total maximum daily loading to those streams for the nutrients. And so if you take them out and you put it into a recycled water facility, those nutrients now become fertilizer that we would then put back on to whatever we're irrigating. So that's a positive thing. It only becomes a problem if in fact it disrupts your treatment plant for different reasons. Whether it's taking out, you don't have enough carbon, which means you would have to add more facilities, like finding another carbon source for the bugs, or other treatment processes you might have to add. So that's probably covering. We don't see a lot of options here for stormwater. So what about recycled water? There's two kinds of recycled water. There's non-potable reuse and there's potable reuse. And non-potable comes in a variety of flavors. Mostly we see that for golf course irrigation, for landscape irrigation, decorative landscape irrigation. Some types of farming use recycled water. In fact, Escondido, just as a point of reference, is going through a program right now to treat their tertiary treated effluent a little bit more so that they can sell it to the avocado farmers. And they need a very high quality water for the avocados. So there are uses, these are all non-potable. Now, potable reuse is basically putting it into the drinking water system in some way, shape, or form. Potable reuse comes in a couple of different flavors as well. One is that we put it into a groundwater basin. And I know that It's nice when you have one. It's nice when you know a lot about the basin and you can have confidence that you have the space to put it in. You can take that out of the groundwater basin if you follow the regulations, and you can use that as potable water. That's what Orange County Water District does right now up in Fountain Valley. And so they are putting in right now about 100 million gallons a day. So we know it works, we know it's safe, we know that we have regulations for that. Two other types of potable reuse include what we call surface water augmentation, which is what the city of San Diego is in the process of doing, where they're gonna send their water to a surface water impound, and then they're gonna take it from there and they're gonna send it to a water treatment plant. And then from the water treatment plant, it goes into the distribution system. The third type of potable reuse is direct potable, where you are taking it from the wastewater facility through an advanced treatment plant, and then you're either taking it directly to a water treatment plant or putting it into a pipe and distributing it to people to use. The first two that I talked about have an avenue for permitting. The third does not at this point. Now, it may at some point, but right now it's not in the works. So let's start with non-potable, and I'm gonna go through all of these and we'll talk a little bit more about the treatment. So the non-potable uses, starting with Twin Oaks Valley recycled water plant. Now this is, I talked about this earlier, there was a study done previously. You can get about a little over 700 acre feet a year, which is nice. The development would fund it, which is also very nice. And it is expandable with growth. So as the growth comes and you have more wastewater, you could expand the plant, you could expand the distribution system. So those are all really nice things. Some of the challenges are that it's very costly. For this small scale, at 727 or so acre feet, it's very expensive per acre foot. It's also, you don't have any existing infrastructure to build off of, so you have to build it all. And then and so as a result, we lose that economy of scale we talked about. Yes?
Question, the number you're using for the water, where do you get that number from?
For the demand?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me actually ask Robert or James if they know.
I'd imagine here that's probably come out of that IRP study that it's referencing there.
2007?
Yes.
So now, with the addition of Newland Sierra, which would be quite a large undertaking, I still understand, but with the addition of Newland Sierra, that would be a very large undertaking for another scalping plant. But still, could pencil out, I don't know. Or could it not pencil out? For a developer, for fees, for what they're gonna have to pay, one way or the other. Only because I know we do have land up there in Twin Oaks that now can be used for stormwater, and so it seemed to be not that difficult to permit through the same agency for a scalping plant, but just out of curiosity.
So, Newland Sierra project, actually, they studied the potential recycled water treatment plant on the site, and definitely, they don't have the final say on this, but in their studies, it didn't pencil out as the most economical issue compared to, actually building sewer facilities to get sewer down to the Vallecitos Water District. The size of the plant, the fact that they have fairly limited amount of irrigable space that they're building into their system, and for what they plan on, or what they've stated in their study, it didn't really pencil out and to kind of use that. Obviously, even if there's some agreement with the developer, they would still be putting a lot of capital. However, if this board so chose, that could be a condition of annexation and something that we can discuss on the way, but the study shows it's not the most economical option.
My thought is not putting it on-site, still putting it off-site in Twin Oaks, so you could use the current water that we're using in this study here along with theirs.
Yeah, so if Newland Sierra were to build a treatment plant somewhere, it doesn't have to be on-site,
Right.
then the district would actually look at expanding it, with our capital for other, obviously, they'd be conditioned for what they need, and the expansion would be something that the district would have to take a look at and this board would have to take a look at it if it wants to get into the recycled water retail business.
But that economically doesn't seem feasible to you?
It's all economically feasible. It's the developer, when they did their options, no matter where that plan is cited, the amount of capital they would have to put in for their base project compared to building the sewer system and paying the cap fees for sewer didn't pencil out for them. So the previous, when it was
Marion Mountain.
Marion Mountains, thank you. We did a study back then, it didn't pencil out, and then they kind of re-upped it, we looked at it in today's economy, and it still didn't pencil out as a number one option. Doesn't mean it's still not on the table, it just means that when the developer did their study and we reviewed it, it wasn't their option to move forward.
We have smaller developers that have come to us that we haven't brought into our district in Escondido that have built their own package plants,
Yes.
which is a basic scalping plant, I assume?
It is, and
More or
in
less?
Harmony Grove, for example, I mean, they came out, the engineer's estimate, which is actually funny, one of the engineers that did the same study for Newland Sierra, and when they updated the study for Marion Mountains, because the bids came in 3 times higher than they thought it would be, and the developer almost, I mean, the standard percent developer, which I know, basically their VP who worked for them for 20 years, no longer works for them. How's that? With that job also, they had a built-in basin, basically a big rock quarry where they had more that had to require 90 days of storage. So if the plant fails for 90 days, they had someplace to put the water. So no matter what, you'd have to build sewer infrastructure, because if a sewer treatment plant failed for 90 days, there's no outlet. They would still have to build a sewer line to handle all the sewer to our system, which we had to convey all the way down to Messina. So there was no savings in sewer infrastructure, and they had to build a plant. That's one of the, unless they build a big hole to stick it in over there, which they aren't planning on doing, obviously, because that would be definitely,
Yeah.
the community would have an issue with that. The quarry existed with Harmony Grove. And the cost of Harmony Grove really set the developer back, saying, we don't even want to talk about this subject, but we did make them take a look at it and get it figured.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and, you know, we're pretty familiar with Harmony Grove Village as well. And just to give you guys a sense of economy of scale, they have, what, 750 homes ultimately, something like that over there? And their treatment plant was like $13 million. Wow. So that's pretty expensive
Yeah.
to start with, plus they gotta own and operate.
Ongoing.
That same treatment plant, and I think it's designed, I might get this wrong, but it's like less than 200,000 gallons a day. I mean, it's very small. But you could have easily treated 1 million gallons a day for about the same price. It's, you just don't get, you got all the same headworks, the primary treatment, the secondary treatment, all the tertiary filters, all that stuff. There's only a few things that are modular that really, okay, you don't get, you don't have to pay that much more to put 2 more in. Everything else is kind of a sunk cost. And then you have pump stations and pipelines and all that stuff that goes along with it. So that's why we're trying to give you a good picture of the things that make sense from economy of scale. Okay. All right. Let's talk about Meadowlark. So we talked about this. Now this is something that you'll see maybe makes sense. And that is that you have some pretty significant users that are not that far away from Meadowlark. And because you have the ability to maybe expand your treatment plant there, your tertiary system, from 5 to 6.5 MGD at a more modest cost, this may be a way to take advantage of some of that extra water. And if you can supply a few users with recycled water, obviously that offsets your need for potable water for that particular use. So anyway, so that's kind of what we're looking at here. It's a short-term opportunity, it's expandable in the future. In other words, you could build those pipelines serving those users large enough to send more water in the future if you expand Meadowlark or you do something else with your water.
Who are the 3 users?
You know, I don't know who they are. The acre feet used per year are shown here. Do you know, Rob, who those 3 are?
these aren't actually specific end users. Every one of these dots is an irrigation meter from our system. That's within the Lake San Marcos. So that's just totaling it. That's about 76 acre feet for the dots in that area. The hillside over there right off of Rancho Santa Fe with the condominium, those are the dots along the HOA with the condominiums. There's the business park that has the different irrigation, including Hunter.
Okay.
So those are just representative.
So
of
they're
the dots.
potential.
And are they already like plumbed for non-potable water? Or?
No, nobody's come from non-potable.
So that would be in addition to this?
Yes.
Yeah, they would have to do that. They would have to go through that process. Okay, and then if you look at, so if that, let's say that last slide represented the first step towards a non-potable system, then if you look at what could you do and build out, that's what this is really looking at. And there's an annual demand of like 1,000 acre feet per year, which is pretty good. This is just looking at some of the larger users, I think, is how Scott put that together. And so this could, expand as the supply expands. We talked about that wastewater in the future getting to be a average daily flow higher.
Well, let me ask a question. Are the larger users more apt to do it because of the savings that they
Yes.
would incur?
Yes.
Where the smaller users
Probably would.
might not deal with it.
That's
HOAs
right.
might not deal with it.
They might not.
But large industry possibly would.
Yes, typically they do, and they're usually pretty excited about it because it's cheaper.
Like Hunter has their own wells.
Yeah, if they already are getting cheap water, they probably wouldn't. It would be economically driven.
And same with the golf course. It has its own wells.
Yeah. So any users that already have a really great deal probably aren't going to want to do that. Yeah, it can, so that's a good point. So water quality, recycled water is a different water quality than potable water that we get from imported water. And so if the salt concentration is too high, some users can't use it. If they're doing some sort of manufacturing and they need super high quality water, they typically can't use it. But most of the recycled water irrigation users, if they're not already on wells, it's usually pretty attractive. You just sell it to them less than potable.
Or they put
I should have just added, what I was gonna add is, I can let you know. Like in Escondido, some of the well users, sometimes the water quality they're getting, although it might be cheaper water, they need consistent water. And Kevin's right, you also got the other side of the salt content, but some of them want better consistency of the water they're getting. So sometimes just because they're on the well, doesn't mean they would make the switch. So whenever you go into any of these non-potable, you would want to talk to all these customers and understand, okay, what's the driver? Are you going to sign up for the water? And you work through those things. And it's very individualized.
And a larger user, though, is more apt to filter it
Absolutely.
themselves.
Absolutely. And ones that run professional businesses, HOAs are generally okay because they have grounds crews. Golf courses are better because they're really sophisticated in how they manage water. So it's tiered down. Once you get, you're right, smaller, less sophisticated, you're going to spend a lot of time, we would recommend it once you get down to the details of a plan, if, we want to go forward with this and you're doing a specific plan, some really small sites, they're not worth your time. You're just going to spend too much staff time trying to get them signed up for it. And then they're going to be calling you all the time about these small issues. Sorry.
No, I see where you're going now. So there's both sides of the water quality. Sometimes your recycled water is better, sometimes it's worse, depending on what kind of water quality they're getting. Some of the farmers in Escondido, actually, their water quality was terrible. And so they were excited about recycled water. Okay. Potable reuse. So I want to kind of just give you an idea of the treatment processes involved in potable reuse. And so we talked about indirect potable reuse. Indirect means that there is a natural barrier between the water coming out of the treatment plant and the end user. So in the case of where we are here, Vallecitos, we have Meadowlark. So if we use Meadowlark as the tertiary treatment, we then take that to microfiltration and reverse osmosis, and then it'll go through a real high intensity oxidation process, typically using ultraviolet light, but there's other ways to do it. And you chlorinate it, and then you send it out to either a groundwater basin, or in the case of San Diego a surface water treatment plant, or a surface water body of some sort, and then a surface water treatment plant. So that's indirect potable reuse. And that's indirect potable reuse that meets regulations. And today, we have regulations for groundwater basins. We don't have approved final regulations for surface water augmentation, but they're in the process of getting those done, and San Diego's driving that. And the draft ones that they have a certain requirement for the size of the reservoir that you put it in. So when you get this really highly treated water, put it in a reservoir, it has to be of a certain size and volume compared to how much water you draw out in order to meet those regulations, okay? And then you could use this treatment process. Now, what's not shown on there is after the engineered storage buffer for surface water augmentation is a water treatment plant, okay? So like Twin Oaks or Alvarado or Escondido, it's a treatment plant that it then goes to. So then there's another step. If you don't have a large enough reservoir.
Yeah, quick.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, do you know how large that reservoir has to be? Just, or any guess?
There are, it depends on how much water you put in, and it has to have, there's a number of different criteria, but it's gotta have like 6 months worth of storage of that water that blends with another 6 months of storage.
So, really sizable.
Pretty big, depending on how large, how much water you're gonna put in there. So for example.
In lies there, I think, you know, as we listen to the DPR, and thank you very much for bringing it up and going through it again, but we've listened to it quite a few times, is that even now, when they were talking about putting it in San Vicente, it's like, oh no, Miramar would be much cheaper. It's not as big, but we'll find a way to get around that.
Right.
I mean, that seems to be the problem with DPR. As far as consumers, we in the industry hear about it constantly. Some of us believe in it, some of us don't.
Yeah.
But out on the street,
Yeah.
so I don't put a lot of faith in DPR in the near future.
I think you're right. I think that's wise. So let's talk about that. So if we're gonna go to Miramar, so let's look at San Diego's system. If we were gonna go to San Vicente Reservoir, which is 249,000 acre feet, with 30 million gallons a day, which is what they're gonna be building at North City, then we had enough volume in that reservoir to have what they call a 2-log removal. It's a 100-to-1 dilution, okay, of that water. And so we did a bunch of studies and looked at that, and we said, okay, that works. It actually works quite well. And when they said, well, we're not gonna do that, we're now gonna go to Miramar. Miramar is only 8,000 acre feet, okay? So you have a much smaller reservoir, same amount of flow. And when you did that, what they said was, okay, well, we're not getting the safety factor in there that we need. And so what we're gonna do is add 2 more treatment processes. And so if you look at this graphic, you see that there's ozone and biologically activated filtration that's upstream of the MFRO, advanced oxidation. So those are 2 very expensive treatment processes that we're going to be adding for San Diego so that they could go to the smaller reservoir. And there's reasons for that. I mean, there's good reasons, and the city has chosen to do that. Now, what this makes possible is the use of smaller reservoirs. Okay, it makes that possible, but it does it at a price. If you have a large reservoir, you don't have to pay for this extra treatment process. And not only is there a large capital cost associated with it, but there's an extremely large operational cost every day, all the time. So it creates a higher cost per acre foot of the water to add this in there. And this is what is just required for indirect potable reuse for surface water augmentation.
So,
Yes.
so we don't have currently storage capacity to even make this even a reality
Right.
at any time.
That doesn't look like it.
Okay. So, just wanted to know
Yeah.
that. This is more educational than anything else.
It is until we get to really a partnership, when you look at it, or, partnering with another agency. You could send water to Leavenhagen, you could send water to, another agency and partner with them. So and the reason for showing this is so you understand the processes that are involved and why it's not a no-brainer to just go to direct potable. Now, when you look at these treatment processes, downstream of your recycled water, your tertiary treatment, your Title 22 purple pipe, okay, this gets you here. DPR is gonna have to have more, right? Because we don't have a natural barrier anymore. So it just adds more cost. And we're gonna talk a little bit about costs here in a minute. So we kind of talked about groundwater recharge a little bit. The possibility would be to put it in the San Marcos area groundwater basin. We don't know a lot about it. Okay, we don't know how much water we could put in there. We don't know how much it can hold. It is going to be expensive to go through that process to figure it out. There's no way around spending a lot of money doing that. And I think last time I made this presentation, there was a question about, well, what would it cost to do this? We looked at this for El Monte Valley for Helix Water District, who owned all the land, and it cost us about $1.5 million to do the investigation.
For the study.
For the study.
And they owned all the land.
What's that?
They owned all the land.
And they owned all the land, and their hope was to mine the sand that was there and pay for this project, and it actually was quite elegant. They didn't go through with it, and they still might at some point, but the point is that just investigating it costs a lot of money. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's pick up the pace here a little bit so we aren't here all night. So indirect potable reuse, groundwater recharge. We talked about the advanced treatment plant challenges. Right now at Meadowlark, you've got about 3 MGD that can be sent to the ocean on top of the 5 MGD. So maybe there's an option where you could build an advanced water treatment plant for that 3 MGD, utilize that for yourself for a potable reuse project. Maybe you could do some different options with it. They're going to be very pricey.
I'm saying, doing what with it?
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Exactly again?
So right now at Meadowlark, you're treating about 5 MGD. You're sending that as tertiary treated water, recycled water, to Carlsbad and Leeuwenhoek. You also are treating, or have the capacity to treat another 3, up to 8 MGD of secondary treatment, okay? And right now in the peak wet weather, you're sending 3 MGD down to the outfall or more, depending on what you
That's
can
only
do.
incremental for those peak times, it's not constant.
Oh, you can't do 8 all
No,
the
no,
time?
we can, but we don't get it.
Right. But if you did, and in the future when you have more wastewater, then you could have that, if you maintain the contracts with the Leeuwenhoek and Carlsbad, keep sending them 5, then you would have 3 MGD that you could do something else with. And that 3 MGD, you could build an advanced water treatment plant at Meadowlark, and then you could take that and you could potentially build an indirect potable reuse project and put that into the San Marcos Basin. We don't know if it's viable, we don't know how big it is, we don't know if it would meet regulations, but it's a potential project that you could look at.
A quick question, if we were able to produce that 3 million gallons per day now, can we not sell it to Leeuwenhoek and Carlsbad? My understanding is they take all we can give them, and
You
we
would have
can't give enough.
to, you would have to add additional tertiary treatments to do that. And right now, you don't have the
Tertiary,
flows
okay.
that are consistent to be able to drive that much. In the future, you will, so you would have that option in the future, if you have the space to do it.
And even if you did, I'm not sure that either of those agencies would consume everything we could produce.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about this, I think we can skip that slide. Surface water augmentation, I talked about the regulations already. We talked about 2 of these, maybe you could take it to South Lake, maybe you could take it to Lake San Marcos. Those have their own challenges. We looked at that when we looked at stormwater. Another option would be to take it to Escondido, take it to Lake Dixon or Lake Wolford. Challenges are it's a long way out there. It's an expensive pipeline, a lot of pumping. Same thing with the Leeuwenhoek, it's another option, but it's once again, you've got an elevation gain that's pretty significant to get to Leeuwenhoek. The one other thing with potable reuse is when you introduce potable reuse water into another water supply, it changes everything for them as well. So if you get a partner, like say you have the water authority as a partner, with the Leeuwenhoek, and you put water in there, now you have a potable reuse project for all of their users. And the public's not always ready for that. You have to do a lot of work to get them ready for that. So it creates an institutional challenge for yourselves. So I just wanted to point that out. So we have South Lake we talked about, and.
Oh, go back to that one?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Which one is this one again?
Okay, so this would be taking potable reuse to South Lake, which is very, very tiny. It's probably too tiny to make it work. But
What if we did a non-portable reuse to South Lake?
That would be possible.
Say that again, please?
So he was asking, what if we did a non-potable reuse project to South Lake? Okay, so if we did that, we'd have to know what we were gonna do with that water. So are you thinking as a
So-
recreational type thing?
Maybe, but let me kind of let me tell you what not really my idea, it's more Jim's idea, but I like it, so I'll try to explain it. So take your red line here to South Lake, non-potable water. Obviously, we know that this is gonna end up being a park and stuff like that, but having a nice constant water supply there will help, will be an asset for that area. Then take and create a man-made type of creek system that runs from South Lake to Discovery and then eventually back into Lake San Marcos to kind of create this huge fountain. And then what I was gonna ask you guys is Mar Reservoir lower elevation than the South Lake area? I'm sorry, not South Lake, Lake San Marcos, or it's higher? 'Cause it would've been really cool if we could complete the circle and then have it end back in Mar and then sell, and then ultimately just keep selling to Olivia Hand, Carlsbad, and others.
So, one of the things, we looked at this in the North County Recycled Water Group, and one of the things to make that happen is South Lake cannot spill over and be attached to the creek system. You can't put recycled water to be used as recycled water and allow it to spill in to the creek system and mix with storm runoff water. So that's a big no-no. So you do it if you isolate South Lake. In theory, so if you look at Mar, for example, Mar's completely isolated, and actually stormwater from the just natural runoff is actually collected and diverted around Mar and goes out the canyon, because you're not allowed to intermix those waters. So you'd have to completely isolate South Lake, and it'd be basically a recycled water reservoir like Mar. So like Mar, in the summertime it'd be mud hole, in the wintertime it'd be full. Summertime it'd be a mud hole, wintertime it'd be full, which is not good for a park setting. However, feasible from a recycled water storage and distribution. From there, you need a pump system, because South Lake's not quite high enough, and then you can pump it up and connect it to your system that goes up Twin Oaks Valley Road to pick up those customers. So you have a system that comes around from Meadowlark, a system that comes up, gets pumped to South Lake, picking up recycled water through San Loyola Hills and Old Creek Ranch, and then stored in the South Lake and then moving up. All very expensive projects, they are possible, but to have a system that kind of cascades and spills over into, not Jack's Pond, but Discovery Lake and then into Lake San Marcos, that's something that the regional board will allow.
Because Lake San Marcos is a connection to the stormwater?
Yeah, stormwater fills Lake San Marcos, although the owner, I think, fills it with groundwater too. Stormwater is supposed to fill Lake San Marcos and then it flows out to the ocean.
Well, I think they would allow an NPDS permit, which would be very difficult to get.
Yeah, it'd be a regulatory obstacle.
Yeah.
We, just a comment on that. In Region 9 of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is where we are, we're in Region 9, there's only one live stream discharger left, and that's Padre Dam at Santee Lakes. Nobody else has a permit to discharge, and that's what you would have to get. And having gone through that process with Padre Dam, I can tell you, just keeping their permit is a challenge. They're very, very difficult to meet those water quality objectives. Any other questions on this?
No Hernandez Lakes?
No, I'm not, we're gonna wait till Wednesday to hear the other side of the story.
Oh, okay, 48 hours later will be okay?
Yeah, hold your breath, just hold your breath.
Okay.
Send it to the D cell, pump it up to the pump at in South Lake, and then all the way over.
We want to go to Hodges.
Okay.
It's closer.
Okay, so we talked about potable reuse. It's unlikely that direct potable reuse is gonna happen anytime soon. If it does, here's an option where we could build all the facilities, we could send the water up to Twin Oaks, maybe. That would be the water treatment plant that you could partner with, or you could build your own water treatment plant as well. We just think this is very expensive and probably not gonna happen in the near future.
What,
Yeah.
and when you say the near future, what is your project, you know, the water industry is slow to begin with, so near future to them is anything 10 years and beyond. Is it that far away? I mean, from the meeting conference we just were at, it seemed like what 4 years ago was 10 to 20 years, now it's 5 or 10 years. Any feeling from yourself?
Yeah, I don't think it's 5 years. I think it's a minimum of 10.
Really?
Before we're gonna actually have regulations and regulators comfortable with letting people do this. And I think more than anything else, it comes down to the regulators do not feel comfortable with all the agencies in California having direct potable reuse systems, that they don't think that they're gonna be able to operate to the level they need to. And when they get through that hurdle, I think this will happen. This is obviously something that, from a engineering standpoint, makes a lot of sense, especially in the water drought-ridden area that we have. Okay, so all that build-up for this, Encina is a realistic option. And if you look at a regional program, you've got a lot more assets to work with. You have other contributors, you get economy of scale. We beat that to death today. And with that, you know, it's a large regional plant. They have land, they have the primary and secondary treatment already available. They have some of the agencies even have recycled water there with Carlsbad's plant. So you could see with the land that they have available in the south parcel at Encina, you could easily turn that into a potable reuse facility. And then what you do with the water from there, I guess you'll find out on Wednesday what their options are. But what I would say is that there are options. And if we're looking at 10 years down the road to have real regulations, you take the member agencies of Encina, you've got a large group of agencies to run this thing, to oversee it, to build confidence from the regulators. I think it's probably a realistic option. So, and whether it's potable reuse or just expanding the non-potable reuse and taking advantage of every drop of water before it goes out to the ocean, I know that James and I have looked at that, James Strayer, probably James comes up as well. You know, it seems like that's the future, is not sending water to the ocean. And in your case, you have a good partner, a good set of partners to make that happen. Okay, so let's talk about the findings and recommendations and get to some costs.
Jeff,
Yes.
one question, going back to the previous map. How much water does Squires Dam hold?
I don't know.
I've never heard of Squires Dam.
Where is it? Where do you see it?
It's on that graphic, kind of in the middle.
Vista?
there.
Front and center.
Right in the center.
It's actually the city of Carlsbad Municipal Water District's facility.
Oh, is
Is
that
it a man-made?
Calavera?
No, it's not Calavera, it's off of, it's in the Shadow Ridge area.
Oh, really?
Okay. So let's get to the findings here, and we're just about to wrap up with this presentation. So avoided costs, you know, one of the drivers for a lot of potable reuse programs is avoided costs. Escondido was driven by an outfall that was over $400 million. With environmental, they don't even know how much it was gonna cost. And so that drove their potable reuse program, because they can spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars and create water that creates revenue, so that makes sense. San Diego had a avoided cost in post-secondary at Point Loma, and that's literally billions of dollars. So that's often what drives reuse projects in general, particularly potable reuse projects. You don't have that right now. Then another driver is the dependence on imported water and diversifying your water portfolio. We think that is absolutely the right thing to be thinking about. And right now, with imported water costs at, this says $12.55, is that what you're paying for?
I think so.
For imported water?
In that range.
You know, it's gotta make financial sense to you. And if it does, then it's worthwhile pursuing, and if it doesn't, you know, maybe just wait a little while, because that $12.55 is not gonna be there for long. And then avoided or deferred wastewater disposal, CIPs, you're still gonna have to have the outfall, so you don't gain that offset like you would if you didn't have to discharge anything ever, unless you were able to go to direct potable. And if you went to direct potable, or indirect potable, I should say, a potable reuse system, you have a disposal. It's your potable system. You always have a place to put that water. With a non-potable system, you don't. Because when they're not using the water, you've got to put that water someplace. Okay, so here's some costs. And these are based on a lot of very, very high-level estimating. And if you look at, so we'll go through these quickly. The non-potable reuse system, the non-potable local at, if you can produce 215 acre feet per year, you've got a very high capital cost of $19 million to do that. And a gross cost is of about $90 or $6,500 an acre foot. And then if you can get some grant funding, you can knock that down a little bit, but it's not going to make a big difference. And that's what that last suggested unit costs are. We get a little bit bigger to 994 acre feet per year. I mean, you're talking about over $10,000 an acre foot to build that. A groundwater IPR, you know, at 3,300 acre feet per year plus, you know, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and very high, you know, order of magnitude, acre foot costs of 8,400. Surface water augmentation even more when you start adding in all of the facilities you don't have. I mean, it just really adds up pretty fast. So, and then the direct potable reuse, the only, I mean, we could go through all these, but the only thing that really starts to make sense is when you get down to the Encina line down there at $1,900 an acre foot. And we see that very routinely, somewhere around $2,000 to $2,200 an acre foot for recycled water, for potable reuse, I should say. And if you have the right facilities upstream, that's how you get it down to that price. If you don't have anything, it goes through the roof. And that's what, you know, everybody's stuck with that. It's not a unique Vallecitos issue. So those are the costs. You know, here's some other challenges. Obviously, cost effectiveness goes through the whole thing. The size and uncertainty of regulations also play into all of these. And if you don't have any regulations for direct potable reuse today, you know, direct potable reuse is a thing we probably want to explore once we have more clarity and certainty on that. And then, so we looked at a lot of things here today. I'm sorry to overwhelm you with all this.
No, I
You
think
have-
just the opposite, because a lot of it to bed.
Okay. Well, I hope that we're successful in leading us in the right direction. Your major asset is the wastewater. You have wastewater. We see a change in that in the future. We'll have more of it as growth expands in San Marcos. You need to, you know, really decide how you want to invest in that. Maybe the non-potable system expansion is the lowest hanging fruit. It's something where you could expand your tertiary system. You could build a small distribution system and get into the market, get into the recycled water game, so to speak, as a retailer. And that can offset some of the demands that you would have for the potable system. So all those things are good. But until some of the regulations change and until there's clarity with partners at Encina, you might want to hold off on pulling the trigger on any of those other larger projects. So,
Question?
I think that's about it. I
Question?
think we've covered everything.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, before I ask a question, I would just have to say that is an amazing report with a great amount of details, and I truly appreciate, I know the board truly appreciates the effort that went into that. That's an amazing comparison, and I think, I appreciate you just putting it out there so we can look at it. We'll see where it goes on Wednesday. But my question is there any concern, even whether we choose to do this or not, but is there a concern with the fact that as the water efficiency measures come into effect and we're supposed to be using less and less water as individuals, supposedly, that changes the strength of the, is that the word, the strength of the wastewater flow? And how does that tie in with going for recycle and direct potable? Is it an issue now, or is it kind of just simmering off on the side and we don't know?
That's a really, really insightful question. And do you want to answer that? Okay. Yeah, so the strength is exactly the right terminology for that, and it is changing, and we anticipate it to change a little bit more. We have another term, but that's called hardening. And when we have gone through a number of the water efficiency measures that we've already gone through, the new developments are all, conditioned to have flow restrictions on just about everything. Then we tend to see, there's only so much people are willing to conserve. They're not going to take 1 minute showers. They're not going to take, they're not going to wash their clothes in 1 drop of water. There's a certain point where we're close. At least a lot of people think that we're starting to see some hardening. We don't see that curve getting steeper and starting to flatten out on the conservation side and on the unit generation that we say going to the wastewater treatment plants. We do see the strength going up. So our concentration of things in the water is higher now than it was 10 years ago. And we have more hydraulic capacity in the wastewater treatment plants. So in other words, where we thought we were going to be on that curve, we thought we were going to see higher flows by this point. Now we don't see those higher flows, but we see a lot of the same waste coming in. So the strength is already there, and we're dealing with that with the biology in the various treatment processes. So it's our secondary treatment processes typically that get impacted, and the bugs. We're using them, and we're growing them, and we're changing how long they live a little bit to accommodate that. So yes, it does impact it.
Well, in that same area then, if the strength's going up, and we probably aren't going to see that going down much, assuming we want to use less water, do then new development and ourselves, when we put new things in, are we making stronger pipes and valves, or do we just know that the life use is less? Because it's much more corrosive, is my understanding.
I don't know. I don't know about the corrosivity aspect of transporting it there. That's what you're referring to. I haven't seen that. I mean, most of the sewer pipes they're either PVC or they're clay, so they're not having a challenge. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
Do you have an answer?
No, there's no studies I've seen that have showed that increased strength of wastewater is more detrimental, at least to the conveyance systems. When you get to the end treatment facilities, it may be a little bit more demanding on, like Encina and what they have to do.
I just thought it was at a conference somewhere where they talked about that, but might not have been in the conveyance system itself.
It could be. I
That's
don't
okay.
know.
Just
You
curious.
might be right. There's
It's
probably
kind
a
of
study.
off subject, actually. No, it's all right.
I think we have one request to speak on this. So, Mr. Hunsaker, do you want to still speak?
Wait, did we get to the recommendations? Did I miss that?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, well, we did, yeah. I probably went through that pretty quickly. So the recommendation, and we could go through each one of these if you would like, and I was trying to speed things up because I thought we'd beat everything pretty good.
Oh, that's okay.
But the recommendation for us is to watch the regulations. As regulations change, then you might want to reconsider some things. So if we do have different direct potable regulations that make it more cost effective to treat your own wastewater, great, or if that works in Encina's favor as a regional project. We're also recommending that you consider a small scale non-potable system, like we talked about earlier, where you might hook up just a short pipeline and expand the tertiary system at Meadowlark. And keep it cost effective. Do it as your flows get a little bit higher, so you have enough wastewater to consistently deliver that recycled water. And that would be a good first step. And then if things change, if the cost of water is, $3,000, $4,000 an acre foot in the future, then these things start to make a lot of sense. Particularly if regulations become a little bit more reduced and reasonable in some ways.
And the board is aware that as part of the North County group that we're applying for grants for a small retail recycled water distribution system, pumps, pipelines, those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
But your numbers reflect that. I mean, on page 44, the DPR Encina, which would seem to be the most cost efficient, is $1,900 gross water cost per acre foot, today's dollar. 10 years from now, that's gonna increase.
Right.
And our desal water cost is $2,400 now,
Roughly.
about $2,400, but still, this is gonna increase substantially over time.
That's exactly correct. What we typically look at is where is that going to be compared to potable water? And James has some really great curves that show imported water costs going up much faster than inflation for these types of projects. And this direct potable reuse project that is at Encina that we have in this table on slide 44 does not include a large distribution system and large reservoirs and these other costs that would be incurred. That's why these are direct potable, and it would be something where you would put it in either a water treatment plant down closer to Encina or into a pipe.
Or, just out of curiosity, obviously, 10 or 15 years from now, you could take everything from Encina, bring it up the beach 1.5 miles, and stick it into the desal and pump it back up again as direct potable. And that's gonna be cheaper than seawater, I understand, and easier than seawater to clean. I understand in 10 or 15 years.
If the regulators and the public were okay with that, that might be a good option.
In years.
Talked about that in the wastewater master plan that was conceptualized as one of the out there visions.
Well, that would be the cheapest way for us to do it.
That would be.
If it was gonna happen,
It'd be a very reasonable way to do it. One thing that it wouldn't do for you is increase your local supply if you do that. Because
Right.
you would be taking water away from the desal project.
right.
So maybe another way to do it is to, build something in addition to that.
Well, yes, but because of our contract with desal, if we increase our contract in 2025, then that additional water would come to us. So we would increase our supply.
For you it would, for the region it wouldn't.
We don't care about the region.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Great report.
Very
Thank you
good
very
report,
much.
very good. Long in coming, but very appreciative and good information.
And only $1.5 million. If we wanna see how many wells we have, $1.5 million will probably cover that.
Probably.
Jim's
Oh,
got
good.
that. Jim's got that.
I got that in my hip pocket. I'll write you a check right now.
Maybe happy to do the work.
We would be, actually.
All right, well,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hunsaker.
Just some notes. Go back, way back. On sand ag projections, they have been grossly bad. I agree with Mr. Martin on that. After all, they said in the 1990s, we spent $1 billion in the Sprinter, 30% of us would be driving less and taking the Sprinter. didn't happen, and then they made another projection in 2000, and it was almost as bad. So Sandag also projected a lot more growth in Vista and a lot less than what's coming in San Marcos. One of the differences that's coming up that I think a little nimbleness is required in reading. One is most of the, as far as I can, from the previous studies, zoning density is the driving metric. But right now, we're talking, especially in San Diego City, of if a developer says he's going to have 5% affordable housing, he's allowed 100% density bonus. This can throw off all your calculations very badly. The other difference is the marijuana. It is a huge consumer of water, much more than the figures that you had in the staff report. And I'm basing it on the state study that was done in 2010. And it estimates something like 6 to 8 gallons per plant per day. And it also called for a very high density of marijuana plants. We're talking about around 3,000 plants per acre. And if you go out and see some of our nurseries, they're growing at even higher densities. This is a mammoth amount of water. Based on lower densities in Colorado, if Newland Sierra decides to take their 378 acres of open land and use it for ag, as they say, I figured out that they would be doing about $500 million a year revenue. This can mean, with about a 20% margin, marijuana is very, very profitable, about $100 million a year business. And it does need very close chemistry of the water. And these areas are not exactly ones that, well, there can be a lot of runoff in them very easily. And if the fertilizer is that toxic, it's a concern. I think it is advisable for Newland Sierra at least not to have permission to grow marijuana. It's in a fire protection zone. The plant is very flammable. It is very water intensive. It is a disaster all the way around, not to speak of rippers operating. I had a lot more comments, but I will close on one factor, and that was this question of pretreatment of water for the small reservoir usage. In the Philippines, where I had done some work, I was using an automated washing system for parts in a clean room. And periodically, every year, we would have huge crystals grow on our parts. Turns out that during the dry season, the contaminants went up by a factor of about 20. It overwhelmed the ozone scrubbing cleaning system that they had. Getting a dry year is indeed a big problem, and it causes you had to have a lot more capacity at the front end than you might need. And just a quick note to Ms. Evans, the piping is typically not the problem with a greater hardness of water. It's usually the valves and the pumps, which really gives you the problems.
I heard something, thanks.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, President Miller. Just a couple items, more housekeeping and updates on the same subject here. First off, staff did meet with the BIA prior to this workshop and went over the same presentation which is really they're more interested in the water resource, not the water resource, but this first presentation of the capital improvement. Explain to them what the process. Overall, the VIA representative and the consultant were very satisfied with the approach, the reasonableness of the approach. And what staff wants to do before we leave today is make sure that the board is comfortable with this approach. It's a less conservative approach, but we feel, both the consultant and staff feel it still has enough in it that we're not undercutting ourselves in our CIPs. They understood the delay in the water CIP, and they also understood that BIA understood the need for the sewer CIP, as those big projects will be paid over multiple phases between the 75 percentile, reaching at Encina, and between our current needs with the outfall. So we had a very productive meeting with them, went over this presentation. Overall positive statements from both the BIA representative and the consultant, mainly from the consultant in the room, which the BIA representative was waiting for the consultant's opinion on our presentation. And with that, I just want to confirm that the board is comfortable with this more conservative or less conservative approach.
My question is just this, with seeing your approach, it doesn't really tell us dollars and cents and budget. It just tells us approach.
Well, it does, because what it does is it shows you basically in comparison in this slide, where's the comparison? This, no, sorry, I'll move up. There is it's green on my bar, but the green was what the first approach would be as far as building water facilities, and the blue is the new one. So we're basically offsetting a majority of it. So you're looking at a CIP that's over a 20-year period that's in the $25 million range instead of something that's going to be in the $90 million range. So basically what we're really looking at is more of a board consensus on the general approach to the master plan, because this is kind of where we got from our previous presentations, where we were looking at it saying this is way too aggressive. We took a step back, did the analysis, and this is the new approach. Both approaches are good with staff and they're defendable.
And Director Martin, one thing you don't see here, which you will see subsequently, is what are the impacts on a developer? What are the fees they would be paying as they go forward? But we need some clear direction on the methodology before we can come forward with impacts like that.
But my understanding, now the green is what we had proposed and the blue is what we're now proposing, correct?
Yes, for water in this case.
Well, can you give me an idea of what projects
Sure.
you've changed?
Yeah, the majority of them, all the projects are the same actually, but the majority of them have been
no
pushed back.
offense to you, but 2 years ago, had to have these projects.
Oh, absolutely, and we've been pushing projects back as the consultant kind of implied, because the recession, and obviously the growth didn't happen. So now what we've done is looked at these projections and said, okay, with the growth that we're seeing and the growth that's coming, because you also have to remember 2 years ago, when we're looking at this red line that came up, not only was that a standard kind of ultra-conservative approach from the SANDAG and from the master planning process, we also had a brand new agreement from a lawsuit with a developer that said he was going to build 2,000 units within 2 years. And we had the city of San Marcos that had the creek that said we're going to build 2,000 units in the next 5 to 10 years. And we had University District, which is the same one, sorry. And we also had another developer, University Heights. We had several developers that said within the next 5 years, we got somewhere between 5,000 to 7,000 units coming. So 2 years ago, when we were going through that process, or more like 3.5 years ago when we were going through that process, this first line was almost justified by the pressure we're getting from development and the lawsuit and the agreements. So we actually had a tie into that number that made sense. Since then, that agreement has already sunsetted, and the developers only built a couple hundred units. So now we can say, okay, let's look at what's really happening. We don't have other pressures from developers saying we're going to build 4,000 or 5,000 units in the next 3 to 4 years. So with that, it was very easy to go to this next adjustment, which is a less conservative adjustment, but we still feel it's steeped in reality of what we're seeing being built.
Go back to the other, thank you. I hear what you're saying. I just don't know, maybe I don't need to know, but I don't know how you've been able to put off that much to ultimate build-out.
Yeah, I've got a question on this particular slide also. The chart with the cost shown here, that's referencing the blue, right?
As far as the ultimate?
Well,
Yes. All the numbers, yes, all the numbers, yes.
Yeah,
all the
so what's the difference between this and the same chart, which would have been for the green?
The numbers are essentially the same, is that correct? We're building the same projects just over a much longer period of time.
So
the
the
tank,
kind of the present value is
Yeah.
roughly equivalent, or?
No, the present, Rob, can you repeat those?
Well, it's gotta be lower if you shoved it out in the
Yes, the present
future
value
years.
would be lower because
Yeah.
we deferred $100 million of capital. About $65 million of that capital is out past 2035. So there's, yeah, and you just answered it, the net present value would be less because we deferred it. So
Okay.
there's a savings for all
So
that.
essentially, it's the same money, but since you're spreading farther into the future, it's a lower net present value.
Correct. A few projects did actually get smaller though. So it's not just, most of them, James is correct, and most of them have been deferred. A few of them did scale down a little bit. And Rob's probably got some details about each of the CIPs that did that. So it's a little bit of combination of those.
so essentially, when we met with the BIA on this, the new process with the new projections would make a lower potential water facility fee, capital facility fee than the existing. Because we don't look at ultimate in the CIP typically for water projects, because we have no water treatment plants or anything of large scale that takes 5, 10, 15 years of planning.
Question, James. And with this lower capital cost, does this directly impact a potential rate increase in the future? Because now our capital improvements have been less?
This has nothing to do with user rates. This has everything to do with developer capital, water capital facility fees.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with rates?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll caveat that, assuming that the rates get set in appropriate fashion to cover all the capital needs in the future, that's true.
Including replacement.
Including, yeah,
It's
so
not just new projects.
if we start under charging capital fees, then that difference needs to be made up from something. And the only other thing is the rates.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely, I apologize.
Did you do?
Well, I was, kind of got lost on that for a second. I was going to say what I appreciated in this, and I think what you're asking for really is, does the board, do we accept a less conservative policy approach to this? And then exact numbers will come as we move forward with projects, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah, it's basically, our next phase now is to move forward with this master plan. If, for example, the staff is recommending us move forward with this new approach, which is still conservative, but not nearly as conservative as initial. So this way we start finalizing the master plan and parallel, start working on our facility fees for development. And also this way the accounting, the finance department will start looking at replacement and fees associated with that. And our discussions with the BIA was we'd work on this parallel and start giving them an idea of the kind of the fruits of this labor, of what the fees may look like. Yeah, so this way they don't have to wait to the end of the master plan process before they have kind of the information. They don't want that ta-da moment, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say then is, one, I appreciate very much that you're asking directly for this policy change. And I think the last time when we, especially as most new ones came into it, we didn't understand where the choices were made, and there was confusion. So this has been explained really well, and I appreciate what you said, Chair Ellithorpe, about explaining the spreading of the, because that was confusing. But I want to say thank you very much for including the BIA, and you know, I wish they were here to tell us how great it went. But I really appreciate that you took the time and effort to do that, and then you're coming back, and I feel very cautious, but you're still taking care of what needs to be taken care of. And I do appreciate it. I felt you did a good job of explaining it, and if the BIA was full board, that's all the better.
And thank you, Director Evans. They would definitely be here if they had a major issue with the results.
Well, I know. They would be.
Yeah. if I add the green columns, and I just did it rudimentary in my mind, and the green columns add up to a lot more than the blue columns. So were the CIP projects cut completely?
Some of them were reduced in size, you know, the amount of pumps that we need to add, or the size of the pipeline, or really the size of storage and the amount of pumps, or not pumps, but size of storage and the pumping capacity were reduced on some of them, I believe.
Okay, to the tune of $25 or $30 million, I'm adding it up, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's quite a bit of savings that was found.
It's not just savings, but if I understand correct, and I could be wrong, but it looks like you're pushing a lot more past 2035.
Yeah.
That's where, see how that last bar there on the
Yeah,
right?
but I was adding that up. That's 116 million. And when I add across the green ones, roughly, because I don't know the exact lines, that's 135 or 140 million in green lines.
Absolutely, but the bigger savings is, as James Strayer mentioned, is when you push those projects out, because a lot of times we have to go out and we may have to borrow for it, then you don't have the, like a mortgage payment, you don't have that loan cost that, with the principal and the interest for 20, 30, 20, 25 years. So pushing those projects out not only do you have $30 million in savings just from a pure total cost, but that you probably have more than that, maybe 40 or $50 million over the 35, 40 years or 50 years of that. So really, in essence, you're probably saving, I don't even know, that's where Tom would help me out with those numbers. I wouldn't venture to guess, but it's
Well,
gonna
how do
be
we
well
today's
more.
numbers, because your costs are gonna be so much more expensive in 2035. So that's a hard thing to extrapolate.
Exactly. However, the borrowing costs, usually like a mortgage, you get a mortgage, you end up paying 3 times the amount of initial price by the time you're paying it off. So, you know, your borrowing costs are significantly reduced by pushing those things out.
Well, hopefully these costs are developer costs, correct?
Well, some of these will be developer jobs, some of these will be CIPs, and there are some replacements. So our next study that we do is going to be separating those out and working with the BIA on what those are. So this way we'll get the numbers. So if you see 25 or $27 million in the first 4 phases, for example, maybe only 15 million of that is growth, and the rest of it may be direct developer or replacement. And that's where we separate that out.
And that's the next workshop.
Yes, and we'll have some meetings with the BIA, and we'll be happy to bring it back to the board if the general manager so wishes, and the board wishes.
We will.
Since you asked the question, I'm comfortable with your approach, so, for what it's worth. 1 out of 5.
2 out of 5.
I'm comfortable as well.
Same.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll move forward with this, and we'll start working with the BIA on the next phase, and then we'll start moving forward with the master plan. And we already got consensus on the water resources. I understand we have a presentation on Wednesday, so I'll be listening for any changes in direction of the water resources pending that presentation, but and to give a final direction to our consultants, because they're just itching to move forward and finish up.
My question is, I appreciate the BIA's involvement, and I appreciate you getting them involved in it. Is that taking a lot of your time?
At this point, no, probably just a few hours, but between Rob and I, it's just been staff. When we get into the next phase, with the actual, the study or the numbers to actually do the water and sewer capacity fees, that'll take a significant amount more time, because that's where the rubber meets the road for the developers is, okay, you have the CIP, we have the duty factors, we have the approach, now what's the cost? So we're looking at a much reduced water cost. I don't know what the final numbers will look like, and the sewer costs, I don't imagine will change that much, because we have some significant projects over time. So, and then it'll be explained that. So that's where the time really is spent with the BIA and also with the development. That's where we have the workshops.
And developers are typically less interested in the overall dollar amount, and they're more interested in the impact fee, like
Sure.
a per unit. So.
How does it affect them? That's what everybody wants to know.
Yeah, and actually that's an excellent point, because on the sewer side, as this board may recall, there was a density impact fee in the past. Well, the reason why we had a density impact fee was we had 0 wastewater treatment in our last master plan. So if somebody added additional units, we didn't have a mechanism, just because, let's say you built 50 units and you're only supposed to build 10, so we collected cap fees for another 40 units. Well, we collected cap fees for our conveyance system, we collected cap fees for our outfall, but we didn't collect cap fees for our sewer treatment. So I explained this to the BIA, that having a wastewater treatment component will pretty much alleviate the need to completely, at the board's will, of course, not suspend, but rescind that ordinance, because I believe it's suspended at this point. So with that, you'll have that component in. And the BIA was, although they're interested in the number, they're very favorable to the approach.
And I'm sorry, 'cause this is the first time I've heard that. You're saying that when we rescinded, or whatever we did with it, got rid of it, you're saying that we didn't have one of the charges in that we now do have?
Yeah, the whole reason for the density impact fee is there was no wastewater treatment component. So when you had a developer who built an extra 100 units, well, we weren't collecting wastewater treatment for them. So the reason was in the 2008 master plan, the way it worked out is we didn't have a wastewater treatment component. Now that our planning horizon extended, we have a wastewater component. So we will now have the reason for a wastewater treatment component within our fees structure, which means the whole premise of our current, which is suspended, density impact fee is void.
So are you talking about a parallel outfall?
No, I'm talking about wastewater treatment.
The outfall is a conveyance mechanism. The treatment is actual treatment capacity down at Encina.
So this density impact fee, was it the case historically that most projects were denser than had been planned?
No, what happened is, if you look at the 2002 master plan, the 97 master plan, they all had wastewater treatment because you had Encina Phase 4 expansion, you had Encina Phase 5 expansion, you had Metal Arc expansion, which is all part of wastewater treatment. So there's a component in it. Then when you got to the 2008 master plan, you had a planning horizon of 2030. And at 2030, with everything that we built, Encina Phase 4, which we were part of, Encina Phase 5, which we were part of, and Metal Arc, we basically met our criteria. So our wastewater treatment number, I don't remember what that number is, Rob, do you? Well, essentially, the number, yeah, 13 MGD, or 13 and change MGD, 13.3 or something like that, MGD, and our treatment capacity was 13.3 MGD at 2030. So, in theory, every one extra unit pushed us above that treatment capacity, and we weren't collecting because we didn't have a component in our fee.
Well,
So,
I guess my question is, weren't there projects that were coming in that were less dense? I mean, weren't there offsets to these more dense?
well, at the time, when everything was coming in, you have to remember the land use wasn't adopted yet, so we're looking at 400 units turning to 2,700 units in the creek. You're looking at
So
800 units turning
they
to 30.
outweighed any
Yeah,
reductions in
and then you're looking at Miriam Mountains at the time. So those were major concerns, but now the fee structure has that in, so it makes us whole.
Okay.
And the BIA was very favorable for that, although they are waiting for the numbers to see what they look like.
Well, I was gonna say, that really depends what the numbers come out to be.
Yeah, well, they're favorable for that approach because they understood from working with us the last time, that was the process, that was the whole nexus for the fee.
All right, is that it?
Thank you.
I just want to quickly thank the board for your patience and your stamina. I realize this was a lot of information to come, and to couple these both on the same night was a lot to ask, but you gave us really good feedback.
Great job, thank you, Glenn. Thank you for putting it all
Great
together
job.
for us.
Good.
Got a lot of answers.
Opportunity to see.
A lot of answers.
All right, I think we're at the end of our agenda. Sure.